Imagine a dimly lit screen, the sound of rain pattering against cobblestones, and a haunting violin note swelling in the background. A cryptic letter, sealed with a raven's crest, lures the legendary Hercule Poirot to Ravenwood Manor, where a masked ball hides a web of secrets. Who poisoned the uninvited guest, clutching a torn scrap of velvet? Why does the sinister Victor Hawthorne plot against his own kin? And what dark truth lies behind the stolen sapphire and a whispered family curse? As masks fall and shadows deepen, Poirot's cunning unravels a conspiracy of betrayal, blackmail, and hidden passages. Will he unmask the mastermind before the final waltz? Dive into a whirlwind of suspense, where every clue sparks a question and every answer demands a price. The screen fades to black, leaving only the echo of a scream and Poirot's piercing gaze. Chapter 1. The Whispered Invitation. The rain fell in a delicate curtain over the cobbled streets of London, each droplet catching the gaslight's glow like a fleeting jewel. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat and his signature, polished shoes, stood beneath the awning of his favorite patisserie, a neatly folded letter clutched in his gloved hand. The letter, delivered that morning by a breathless courier, bore no return address, only a wax seal embossed with a raven, clutching a rose. Its contents were as intriguing as they were vague, penned in a looping, elegant script that hinted at both wealth and secrecy. Monsieur Poirot, it began, your reputation for unraveling the impossible precedes you. I humbly request your presence at Ravenwood Manor for a masked ball this Saturday eve, where a matter most delicate requires your singular intellect. Discretion is paramount. Trust in the raven's call. Yours, a friend. Poirot's mustache twitched as he reread the final line, his sharp gray eyes narrowing. A friend, indeed. He did not take kindly to anonymity, yet the challenge, the faint whiff of a puzzle, stirred his curiosity. The date was tomorrow, and Ravenwood Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the misty hills of Kent, was known for its opulence and its reclusive lord, Reginald Hawthorne. Poirot tucked the letter into his pocket, tipped his hat to the patisserie's owner, and hailed a cab. The game, as his friend Hastings might say, was afoot that the journey to Ravenwood Manor was a study in contrasts. London's clamor faded into the soft hum of the countryside, where hedgerows and ancient oaks lined the winding road. Poirot, seated in the plush interior of a hired Rolls-Royce, reviewed the scant details he knew of the Hawthornes. Lord Reginald, a man of inherited wealth and rumored temper, had married Lady Eleanor, a beauty with a penchant for philanthropy and a shadowed past. Whispers of a family rift, something about a disinherited cousin, had reached even Poirot's ears, though the specifics remained elusive. The manor itself was a legend. Its Gothic spires and stained glass windows, the backdrop for tales of lost fortunes, and whispered curses dot as the car crested a hill. Ravenwood emerged from the mist like a spectre. Its stone facade loomed, ivy-clad, and imposing, with gargoyles perched atop turrets that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. Torches flickered along the gravel drive, casting long shadows as liveried footmen ushered guests toward the grand entrance. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, his ebony cane clicking against the ground as he stepped out. The air carried the scent of damp earth and anticipation. The masked ball was already in full swing when Poirot entered the great hall. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, their light fracturing across gilded mirrors and polished marble floors. Guests swirled in a kaleidoscope of silk and velvet, their faces concealed behind masks of feathers, lace, and gold. A string quartet played a haunting waltz, the notes weaving through laughter and the clink of champagne flutes. Poirot, his own mask, a simple black domino that accentuated his piercing eyes, moved through the crowd with the grace of a panther, observing, Lord Reginald Hawthorne stood near a towering fireplace, his lion mask failing to hide his commanding presence. His broad shoulders and booming laugh drew a cluster of admirers, though Poirot noted the tension in his posture, as if he were a man expecting a blow. Beside him, Lady Eleanor glided in a gown of midnight blue, her peacock feather mask shimmering with emerald and sapphire hues. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes darted nervously, scanning the room. Poirot's attention shifted to a man lingering near a velvet-draped alcove, tall and lean, with a silver wolf mask that gleamed under the chandelier's glow. He moved with a predator's restraint. His dark eyes locked onto Reginald, and Poirot sensed a current of malice. Could this be the cousin Victor, whose name had surfaced in society's whispers? Before Poirot could approach, a woman in a crimson gown and a cat mask brushed past, her gloved hand grazing the wolf-masked man's arm. The gesture was fleeting but deliberate, a signal Poirot filed away for later scrutiny. He accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray, using the moment to survey the room. The guests were a curious mix, aristocrats mingling with artists, diplomats exchanging quips with eccentrics. Yet beneath the revelry, Poirot detected an undercurrent of unease. Conversations faltered when certain names were mentioned. Glances were exchanged behind masks. The letter's promise of a delicate matter felt more ominous by the minute. Magnificent, isn't it? A voice purred at his elbow. Poirot turned to find a young woman in a swan mask, her blonde curls cascading over a gown of ivory. Silk, her accent hinted at Paris, though her poise suggested English breeding. The manner, I mean. They say it's cursed, but who believes such nonsense? Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but guarded. Mademoiselle, a house as old as this one carries many stories. Some are nonsense, others less so. I am Hercule Poirot, at your service. Her eyes widened behind her mask, a spark of recognition. The detective? Oh, how thrilling. I'm Clara Duval, governess to Lord Reginald's ward. You must tell me, Monsieur Poirot. Are you here to unmask a villain or simply to dance? Poirot chuckled, his mustache curling. Perhaps both, Mademoiselle Duval. But tell me, what brings a governess to such a grand affair? Clara's laugh was light, but her gaze flickered toward the wolf-masked man. Curiosity, I suppose, and the chance to wear something other than gray wool. But you're right to sense a mystery. There's something off tonight. Haven't you felt it? Before Poirot could press her, a commotion erupted near the center of the hall. The music faltered, and a woman's scream cut through the din. Guests parted like a tide, revealing a figure crumpled on the marble floor, a man in a harlequin mask, his body still, a torn scrap of velvet clutched in his hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Lady Eleanor rushed forward, her peacock mask slipping to reveal a face pale with shock. "Dr. Langley!" she cried, kneeling beside the man. Someone fetch Dr. Langley. Poirot was already moving, his cane tapping a steady rhythm as he reached the scene. The man's chest rose faintly, but his eyes were closed, his lips tinged with an unnatural pallor. Poirot knelt, careful not to disturb the velvet scrap, which was a deep burgundy, frayed at the edges as if torn from a larger garment. He scanned the crowd, noting the wolf-masked man's absence and Clara Duval's sudden stillness. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his mind racing. This is no accident. Dr. Langley, a wiry man with a hawk mask, pushed through the crowd, his medical bag in hand. He checked the man's pulse, his expression grim. He's alive, but barely. Some kind of poison, I'd wager. We need to get him to a room. As footmen carried the man away, Poirot's gaze lingered on the velvet scrap. It was a clue, tangible and deliberate, left as if to taunt him. He straightened, his eyes sweeping the hall. The music resumed, but the mood had shifted. The masks no longer seemed festive, but sinister, hiding truths that demanded to be uncovered. Poirot approached Lady Eleanor, who was wringing her hands, her composure fraying. "Madame, a word, if you please." "This man, who is he?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to her husband, who was barking orders to the staff. "His name is Julian Marsh, a family friend. He arrived uninvited, which caused some stir, but I never imagined—" "Uninvited?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And yet he was permitted entry?" "Reginald insisted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said it would be rude to turn him away, despite complications." Poirot nodded, filing away the word complications. He excused himself and moved toward the alcove where the wolf-masked man had stood. The space was empty now, but a faint scent of cigar smoke lingered, mingling with something sharper chemical, perhaps. He crouched, inspecting the floor, and found a single pearl bead, its luster catching the light. It was small, easily overlooked, but to Poirot it was a beacon. He rose, tucking the bead into a handkerchief. The scream, the velvet, the pearl all. Pieces of a puzzle that was only beginning to take shape. The letter had promised a delicate matter, but this was no mere scandal. Someone had orchestrated this chaos, and Poirot suspected the night held more secrets yet to be revealed. As the ball continued, Poirot slipped into the shadows, his mind a whirl of deductions. He would need to speak with Lord Reginald, track down the wolf-masked man, and uncover Julian Marsh's true role in this drama. The Raven's call had summoned him, and Hercule Poirot was not one to ignore such a challenge. The chapter closed with him standing by a window, the rain outside mirroring the storm brewing within Ravenwood Manor, his resolve as unyielding as the stone walls around him. The great hall pulsed with renewed energy, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. He approached a footman, a young man with a nervous tic, and inquired about the guest list. The footman stammered, admitting that several guests had slipped in without formal invitations, a breach of protocol that Lord Reginald had overlooked. Poirot's lips pursed. Sloppiness in such matters was fertile ground for mischief. He next sought Clara Duval, who was sipping champagne near a marble statue of a nymph. "Mademoiselle, you mentioned a feeling of unease. Have you seen anything unusual tonight? A guest, perhaps, who does not belong?" Clara's fingers tightened around her gloss. "There was a man earlier, in a silver mask. He was watching Lord Reginald like a hawk watches a mouse. I didn't like his eyes, they were too hungry." Poirot nodded, her description aligning with the wolf-masked figure. "And this man, did he speak with anyone?" "Only briefly. A woman in red with a cat mask. They were near the alcove, whispering. I couldn't hear much, but it felt secretive." Poirot thanked her, his mind cataloguing the details. The woman in red, the wolf-masked man, the pearl bead, they were threads in a tapestry he was only beginning to weave. He glanced at Lord Reginald, who was now deep in conversation with a portly man in a bear mask, their voices low and urgent. The night was young, but the stakes were already high as the clock struck 11. Poirot made his way to the corridor where Julian Marsh had been taken. The door to the guest room was ajar, and Dr. Langley stood inside, scribbling notes. Poirot knocked lightly, entering to find Marsh still unconscious, his breathing shallow. The doctor looked up, his hawk mask pushed atop his head. "He's stable." "But it's touch and go," Langley said. "The poison's effects are unlike anything I've seen, slow-acting, subtle. Whoever did this knew their craft." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the velvet in his hand? Have you examined it?" Langley shook his head. "Not closely. But it's odd, isn't it? Almost as if it was placed there." Poirot's mind seized on the word placed. A deliberate act, then, not a struggle. He thanked the doctor and returned to the hall, his steps purposeful. The masked ball was a facade, a glittering distraction from a darker truth. Someone had poisoned Julian Marsh, and the velvet scrap was their calling card. Poirot's fingers brushed the pearl bead in his pocket, a silent promise to unmask the culprit. The chapter ended with Poirot standing alone in the corridor, the distant strains of the waltz fading as he contemplated his next move. The ravens. Call had led him here, to a manor steeped in secrets and a crime that demanded his genius. He would not disappoint. Chapter 2. The Masked Stranger. The grand hall of Ravenwood Manor shimmered under the glow of a dozen chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light like stars trapped in glass. The masked ball was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of silks and velvet swirling to the lilting strains of a string quartet. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the ballroom, his small, precise figure a quiet contrast to the opulent chaos. His black suit was immaculate, his mustache waxed to perfection, and his eyes sharp as a hawk scanned the crowd with relentless curiosity. The scream from the previous night still echoed in his mind, a jagged note that had shattered the evening's elegance and left a guest, one Miss Beatrice Langley, unconscious in the East Wing corridor, a torn scrap of crimson velvet clutched. In her hand, Poirot sipped his tisane, the herbal warmth grounding him amidst the whirl of masked faces. The letter that had summoned him to Ravenwood had been vague yet tantalizing, penned in an elegant hand that hinted at secrets too delicate for open words. A scandal brews, it had read, and only your little gray cells can prevent its eruption. Now, with a mystery already afoot, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase. Who had attacked Miss Langley? And why was that scrap of velvet, stained with the faintest trace of a strange scent, so significant? He moved through the crowd, his steps measured, his ears attuned to the undercurrents of conversation. The guests, hidden behind their masks peacocks. Wolves, jesters, and queens spoke in guarded tones, their laughter too bright, their glances too fleeting. Poirot noted the way they avoided certain topics, the way their hands tightened around champagne flutes when certain names were mentioned. The manor's host, Lord Reginald Hawthorne, stood near the grand staircase, his golden lion mask glinting, as he greeted guests with practiced charm. His wife, Lady Eleanor, glided at his side, her silver swan mask catching the light, her smile as polished as the marble floor beneath her feet. Yet there was a tension in her posture, a slight rigidity, that Poirot's keen eye did not miss. He approached a group of guests near the refreshment table, where whispers buzzed like bees. A tall man in a raven mask, his voice low and clipped, was recounting a tale of a recent theft in London. A sapphire necklace vanished from a duke's safe. Poirot tilted his head, feigning casual interest, but his mind catalogued the detail. Sapphires. Ravenwood Manor was known for its own gem, the Hawthorne sapphire, locked in a display case in the great hall. Could there be a connection? Pardon, monsieur, Poirot interjected smoothly, his French accent lending a disarming softness to his words. This tale of theft, it is most intriguing. Has Ravenwood ever suffered such a misfortune? The raven-masked man turned, his eyes narrowing behind the mask. Not that I've heard, he said curtly. The Hawthorns guard their treasures well. Mais oui, Poirot replied, his smile polite but probing. And yet, treasures have a way of attracting those who would claim them, n'est-ce pas? The man stiffened, then excused himself, melting into the crowd. Poirot's gaze followed him, noting the slight limp in his gait, a detail to store for later. He turned his attention to the others in the group, a woman in a peacock mask and a young man dressed as a harlequin. The woman's laughter was too loud, her gestures too expansive, as if to distract from something. The harlequin, meanwhile, kept glancing toward the staircase, where Lord Reginald stood. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft tap on his shoulder. He turned to find a young woman in a delicate butterfly mask, her auburn hair cascading in curls beneath it. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice hesitant but clear. "Oui, mademoiselle," he replied, bowing slightly. "And to whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?" She hesitated, glancing around before leaning closer. "My name is Clara Weston. I'm the governess here. I overheard something last night, before the scream. I thought you should know." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Speak, mademoiselle. What did you hear?" Clara's fingers twisted the edge of her shawl. It was in the west wing, near the conservatory. Two men, arguing. One of them said, "You'll regret crossing me, Victor." I couldn't see their faces. But the other man, Victor, I presume, laughed. He said, "Reginald will fall, and I'll have what's mine." Then I heard footsteps, and I hid. "Victor," Poirot repeated, his mind racing. Victor Hawthorne, Lord Reginald's estranged cousin, was a name whispered in the manor's shadows. The family feud was no secret. Victor had been banished years ago, after a scandal involving forged documents and a claim to the Hawthorne estate. Could he be behind the attack on Miss Langley? And what did he mean by "what's mine"? "Merci, Mademoiselle Weston," Poirot said, his tone grave. "You have done well to tell me this. Did you recognize the other voice?" Clara shook her head. It was muffled, angry. I think he was wearing a mask, too. But there was something else. She reached into her pocket and produced a small, glinting object. "I found this on the floor near where they argued. I didn't know what to do with it." Poirot took the object, a locket, silver, and intricately engraved with a crest he did not recognize. A rampant griffin, its claws raised, adorned the surface. He opened it, finding it empty, but the faint scent of lavender clung to the metal. "This is most curious," he murmured. "May I keep it, mademoiselle?" Clara nodded. "Please, be careful. I don't know what's happening here, but it feels dangerous." Poirot slipped the locket into his pocket, his mind already turning over possibilities. The crest was unfamiliar, not the Hawthorne family's lion. Was it a clue to the identity of the second man in Clara's story? Or was it tied to Miss Langley's attacker? He needed to speak to the victim herself, though her condition confused and weak from the attack made that challenging. He excused himself from Clara and made his way to the east wing, where Miss Langley was resting in a guest room under the care of the manor's physician, Dr. Marwood. The corridor was quiet, the revelry of the ball a distant hum. Poirot knocked softly and was admitted by a stern-faced maid. Inside, Miss Langley sat propped against pillows, her face pale beneath her unmasked features. Her eyes, wide and anxious, darted to Poirot as he entered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "they say you're a detective. Can you tell me what happened? I can't remember anything after the dancing began." Poirot took a seat beside her, his demeanor gentle but focused. "Mademoiselle, I am here to help. Tell me what you recall, however small. The mind, it holds fragments, and even the smallest may be the key." Beatrice frowned, her fingers twisting the bedsheet. "I was dancing, laughing. I think I had too much champagne. And I felt dizzy, and I stepped into the corridor for air. Someone was there, a shadow, moving fast. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. Then, nothing, just darkness." "A shadow," Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. "Did this shadow wear a mask? Do you see anything distinctive?" She shook her head, then paused. "There was a scent. Something sharp, like medicine, but sweet too. And the velvet, I felt it brush against my hand before I fell." Poirot leaned forward, his interest sharpening. The velvet scrap, now in his possession, had indeed carried a faint chemical odor, one he suspected was not mere perfume. "Merci, mademoiselle. Rest now. I will find the truth." As he left the room, Poirot's mind churned. The scent, the velvet, the locket, the argument Clara overheard, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. He needed to find Victor Hawthorne, but first he sought out Lord Reginald. The host was still by the staircase, now deep in conversation with a man in a jester's mask. Poirot approached, his polite smile masking his intent. "Lord Reginald," he said, bowing. "A moment, if you please." Reginald's lion mask turned, his eyes wary but courteous. "Monsieur Poirot, enjoying the festivities?" "Most assuredly," Poirot replied. "But I am troubled by the incident with Mademoiselle Langley. Tell me, have you seen your cousin Victor this evening?" Reginald's posture stiffened, his voice dropping. "Victor? He's not welcome here. We parted ways years ago. If he's skulking about, it's without my invitation." "Interesting," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "And yet there are whispers of his presence. Perhaps you know of someone who might wish harm to your guests?" Reginald's eyes flashed behind the mask. "If you're suggesting I'm involved, Monsieur Poirot, you're mistaken. My only concern is my guest's safety." "Of course," Poirot said smoothly, "but safety, it requires vigilance. I will continue my inquiries." As Reginald turned away, Poirot caught a glimpse of Lady Eleanor watching from across the room. Her swan mask hid her expression, but her hands were clasped tightly, betraying her unease. Poirot filed the observation away and moved toward the ballroom's edge, where a set of French doors led to a moonlit terrace. He stepped outside, the cool night air a relief after the stifling warmth of the crowd. The terrace overlooked the Manor's gardens, their manicured hedges silvered by moonlight. Poirot's gaze swept the shadows, and there near a stone fountain he saw a figure. Tall, cloaked, and masked as a wolf, the man moved with purpose, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting pursuit. Poirot's instincts flared. He descended the steps silently, keeping to the shadows, his small frame blending with the night. The wolf-masked man paused by the fountain, pulling something from his cloak, a small vial, glinting in the moonlight. He poured its contents into the fountain, the liquid hissing faintly as it met the water. Poirot's heart quickened. Poison? Or something else? Before he could act, the man turned, catching sight of Poirot's silhouette. With a muttered curse, he bolted toward the garden's edge, vanishing into the maze of hedges. Poirot gave chase, his polished shoes ill-suited for the gravel paths, but his determination unwavering. The maze twisted and turned, its high walls muffling the sounds of the ball. He caught glimpses of the wolf mask ahead, always just out of reach. At last, the path opened to a small clearing, where the man had vanished. Poirot stood, catching his breath, his eyes scanning for clues. There, on the ground, lay a single item, a handkerchief, embroidered with the same griffin crest as the locket. He picked it up, his mind racing. The crest, the vial, the argument, the velvet, all connected. But how? Victor Hawthorne was the key, he was certain. The man's name had surfaced too often to be coincidence. Poirot resolved to find him, to confront him before the night was out. The masked stranger, whoever he was, had left a trail, and Poirot's little gray cells were already tracing a dot as he returned to the Manor. The music of the ball swelled once more, a deceptive veneer of merriment over the dark currents beneath. Poirot clutched the handkerchief and locket, his resolve hardening. The mystery of Ravenwood Manor was deepening, and he would unravel it, thread by thread, until the truth stood unmasked. Chapter 3. Shadows in the library. Hercule Poirot adjusted his bow tie, the crisp silk whispering under his deft fingers. As he stood in the grand foyer of Ravenwood Manor, the masked ball's echoes still lingered in the air, laughter, clinking, glasses, and the faint strain of a violin. Yet the memory of the chilling scream from the previous night clung to him like damp fog. A guest, one Miss Beatrice Langley, had been found unconscious in the rose garden, her gloved hand clutching a torn scrap of black velvet. The doctor, summoned in haste, had stabilized her, but her condition remained a puzzle. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with purpose. A crime had been committed, and he would uncover its roots. The Manor's library beckoned, its heavy oak, doors standing like sentinels at the end of a marble corridor. Poirot had overheard the servants whispering of its peculiarities, books older than the Manor itself, shelves that seemed to shift in the candlelight, and a faint scent of secrets. If answers lay anywhere, they would be here, among the tomes. And shadows dot as he pushed open the doors. A wave of musty air greeted him, laced with the scent of aged leather and wax. The library was cavernous, its high ceilings lost in gloom, with walls lined by towering shelves that groaned under the weight of countless volumes. A massive chandelier hung overhead, its crystals dulled by dust, casting fractured light across a long mahogany table at the room's center. Stained glass windows, depicting scenes of medieval knights and celestial maps, filtered the morning sun into hues of crimson and sapphire. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly on the parquet floor. As he surveyed the space, his eyes, sharp as a falcon's, noted every detail: the uneven wear on the rug near the fireplace, a faint scratch on a shelf's edge, and a single candle, burned low, abandoned on a side table. Someone had been here recently, perhaps in the hour. Dead of night. Mon Dieu, he murmured, stroking his mustache. This room, it whispers of things hidden. But what? He began his exploration at the nearest shelf, his gloved fingers trailing over spines embossed with gold. Titles in Latin, French, and English spoke of history, alchemy, and forgotten lore. One book, The Chronicles of Ravenwood, caught his eye. Its leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed. He opened it, revealing a genealogy of the Hawthorne family, tracing back centuries. A name, Eleanor Hawthorne, was underlined in faded ink, accompanied by a cryptic note: "Beware the shadow that follows." Poirot's brow furrowed. Lady Eleanor, the host's wife, had seemed nervous at the ball, her eyes darting behind. Her mask, was this a coincidence or something more? As he replaced the book, a faint creak echoed from the far end of the library. Poirot froze, his senses alert. The sound came again, a deliberate shift, not the settling of an old house. He moved silently toward the source, his cane tapping lightly to mask his approach. Behind a shelf labeled Occult Studies, he found a narrow alcove, its walls lined with books on astrology and ancient curses. A single volume, The Star's Decree, lay askew, as if hastily returned. Poirot's fingers brushed the shelves edge, and he felt a slight give. With a gentle push, a panel clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a cigar box. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a crimson ribbon, and a small vial of amber liquid, stoppered with wax. The letters bore the crest of a raven clutching a star, the same crest he'd seen in a locket dropped at the ball. His heart quickened. This was no accident. He untied the ribbon and scanned the first letter, dated 20 years prior. It was addressed to "My dearest Margaret," and signed by a Cornelius Hawthorne. The words were fervent, speaking of a forbidden's love and a curse that haunted the Hawthorne line. "The shadow follows us," it read, "and the stars will not forgive." Poirot's mind raced. Cornelius was Lord Reginald's late father, and Margaret, he recalled, was the name of Victor's mother, the estranged cousin's branch of the family. The letter hinted at a scandal buried deep, one that might explain the tensions at the Manor. The vial intrigued him more. Its contents shimmered faintly, and a faint almond-like scent wafted from the seal. Poison, perhaps. He tucked it into his pocket for later analysis, suspecting it might match the substance found on the torn velvet. The letters, too, he secured, knowing they held clues to the manor's secrets. A soft cough broke his reverie. Poirot turned to find Miss Beatrice Langley standing at the alcove's entrance, her face pale and her eyes wide with uncertainty. She wore a simple gray dress, her auburn hair loosely pinned, a far cry from the elegance of her ball gown. The doctor had said she'd awakened that morning, claiming no memory of the attack, but her presence here suggested otherwise. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I didn't expect to find you here." "And yet, mademoiselle, here we both are," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but probing. "The library, it calls to those who seek answers. Tell me, what brings you to this shadowed corner?" Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. I couldn't sleep. I keep hearing whispers in my head about a shadowed figure. I thought the library might hold something to explain it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Whispers, you say? And this shadowed figure, what do you recall?" She shook her head, her gaze distant. "It's like a dream. A figure in a cloak, moving through the garden. I tried to follow, but then nothing. I woke in my room, with the doctor hovering over me." Poirot studied her closely. Her fear seemed genuine, but her presence in the alcove was too convenient. Was she truly a victim, or was she playing a part? "Mademoiselle, you clutch your handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. Perhaps you know more than you say?" Her eyes flashed with indignation. "I'm not lying, monsieur. I came here because I felt drawn, as if something in this room called to me." Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "Very well. Let us search together. Perhaps the library will reveal its secrets to us both." They moved to the central table, where Poirot spread out the letters. Beatrice's eyes widened at the sight of the raven and star crest. "I've seen that before," she whispered, "on a ring worn by a man at the ball. I don't know his name, but his mask was silver, shaped like a wolf." Poirot's mind catalogued the detail. A silver wolf mask, distinctive, memorable. He'd seen such a mask on Victor Hawthorne, the estranged cousin whose heated exchange with Lord Reginald had not gone unnoticed. Could Victor be the shadowed figure? And if so, what was his motive? As they sifted through the letters, a pattern emerged. Each spoke of the Hawthorne curse, a tale of betrayal and loss tied to a celestial event, a rare alignment of stars. One letter, written by Cornelius, mentioned a ritual performed in the manor's observatory, meant to appease the stars' decree. It had failed, resulting in a tragedy that split the family. Poirot's mind whirred. The observatory, he must visit it next. A sudden clatter from the shelves startled them. Poirot spun, his cane raised, as a book tumbled to the floor. Behind it stood the butler, Mr. Grayson, his face a mask of composure despite the intrusion. His dark suit blended with the shadows, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Pardon me, Monsieur Poirot, Miss Langley," Grayson said, bowing slightly. "I was merely checking the shelves. The master dislikes disarray." Poirot's smile was tight. "A diligent servant, monsieur. Yet you appear in the very moment we uncover secrets. Tell me, what do you know of this crest?" He held up a letter, the raven and star emblem prominent. Grayson's composure faltered. "It's an old family symbol, sir, nothing more. Now, if you'll excuse me." "Stay, s'il vous plaît," Poirot said, his voice firm. "You were at the ball, yes? Did you see a man in a silver wolf mask?" Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "I did. He was near the garden when Miss Langley was found. But many guests wore masks, sir. It's hardly unusual." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet you recall him specifically. Most interesting." Grayson excused himself, claiming duties elsewhere. But Poirot noted the haste in his steps. The butler knew more than he let on, and Poirot resolved to watch him closely. Turning to Beatrice, Poirot said, "Mademoiselle, you have been most helpful. Return to your room and rest. Speak of this to no one. The shadows in this manor are many, and not all are friendly." Beatrice nodded, her face pale, and left the library. Alone again, Poirot returned to the hidden compartment, searching for further clues. He found a small key, engraved with the same crest, tucked beneath the shelf. It was too small for a door, perhaps a lockbox or a drawer. He pocketed it, his mind alight with possibilities. The library's silence was broken by a distant chime, the manor's clock striking noon. Poirot moved to the stained glass windows, their celestial designs glowing in the sunlight. One panel depicted a raven holding a star, its beak pointed toward a constellation. He traced the lines, noting the alignment matched the date in Cornelius's letter. A stellar event 20 years ago. The curse, the letters, the poison all were connected, and the observatory held the next piece of the puzzle dot as he prepared. To leave, a faint scent caught his attention, the same almond-like odor from the vial, emanating from the fallen book. He retrieved it, a treatise on toxicology, and found a page marked with a pressed flower. The text described a rare poison, derived from a plant found only in the manor's apothecary garden. The torn velvet, he recalled, had tested positive for a similar substance at the hospital. The attack on Beatrice was no accident. It was deliberate, calculated. Poirot's lips curved into a determined smile. "The little gray cells, they do not rest," he murmured. "This poison, this crest, this curse, they weave a tapestry of deceit. But Hercule Poirot, he shall unravel it." He left the library, the key and letters secured in his coat, his mind mapping the next steps. The observatory awaited, as did the truth about the shadowed figure. Victor Hawthorne, with his silver wolf mask, was a prime suspect, but the butler's unease and Beatrice's vague memories suggested others might lurk in the shadows. The manor's secrets were deep, but Poirot's resolve was deeper still. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Ravenwood Manor's grounds as Poirot made his way to the apothecary garden. The air was heavy with the scent of herbs, rosemary, thyme, and something sharper, more sinister. The garden, tucked behind a stone wall, was a labyrinth of neatly trimmed hedges and rare plants, its centerpiece a glasshouse where the manor's apothecary supplies were kept. Poirot's earlier conversation with the head gardener, Mr. Finch, had been brief but illuminating. Finch, a wiry man with soil-stained hands, had confirmed that only a few had access to the glasshouse. Himself, Lord Reginald, Lady Eleanor, and the butler, Grayson. Victor, as a guest, was not permitted, but Finch admitted to seeing him loitering near the garden the night of the ball. The poison, Poirot suspected, had come from here, and the key in his pocket might unlock its source. The glasshouse door creaked as he entered, revealing rows of shelves lined with jars, vials, and dried herbs. A workbench held a mortar and pestle, stained with a faint green residue. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the shelves, pausing at a jar labeled Prunus amygdalis bitter almond, the source of the poison's distinctive scent. The jar was nearly empty, its lid slightly askew, as if recently opened. He examined the lock on a nearby cabinet, its brass gleaming in the dim light. The key from the library fit perfectly, clicking open to reveal a ledger. The pages listed ingredients used in the manor's remedies. But one entry stood out, a batch of bitter almond extract, prepared a week before the ball, signed by Grayson. The butler's name again too frequent to be coincidence. A rustle outside the glasshouse made Poirot pause. He slipped the ledger into his coat and stepped into the shadows, his cane gripped tightly. Through the glass he saw a figure moving among the hedges, a man, cloaked, his face obscured by a hood. The shadowed figure Beatrice had described? Poirot's pulse quickened, but he remained still, watching as the figure bent to examine a plant, then vanished into the dusk. Poirot emerged, his eyes scanning the garden. Footprints in the soft earth led to a hidden gate, partially concealed by ivy. He followed, finding himself at the edge of the manor's grounds, where a path wound toward the observatory. The figure was gone, but the trail was fresh. Poirot's mind buzzed with questions. Was this Victor or another player in this intricate game? The observatory loomed ahead, a stone tower crowned with a glass dome. Its door was ajar, and a faint light flickered within. Poirot entered cautiously, his senses alert. The interior was a marvel of brass and glass, with a massive telescope aimed at the heavens. Charts and star maps covered the walls, their intricate lines mirroring the stained glass window in the library. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an astrological chart, its edges worn but its ink vivid. The chart depicted the constellation from the library window, with annotations in Cornelius's hand. Poirot studied it, noting a date circled in red, the night of the ball, when the stars would align as they had 20 years ago. The curse, it seemed, was tied to this celestial event, and someone had used it to orchestrate chaos. A creak behind him made Poirot turn, but no one was there. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself held its breath. He moved to a side table, where a telescope log lay open. The last entry, dated the previous night, was in an unfamiliar script. The shadow moves at midnight. Poirot's lips tightened. The shadowed figure was no myth, it was real, and it was active. As he left the observatory, the manor's lights glowed in the distance, a beacon of secrets. Poirot's mind pieced together the clues, the poison from the apothecary, the letters. In the library, the crest linking Victor to a buried scandal, and now the astrological chart tying it all to a cursed night. The attack on Beatrice was the opening move in a larger scheme, and the shadowed figure was its architect. Back in his room, Poirot sat at a small desk, the letters and vial before him. He lit a candle, its flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. The poison, he deduced, had been administered through the torn velvet glove, perhaps soaked in the extract and pressed against Beatrice's skin. The amnesia was a side effect, but her survival suggested a non-lethal dose, meant to frighten rather than kill. Why? To sow fear, to destabilize the manor, to set the stage for something greater. Poirot's thoughts turned to Victor. His silver wolf mask, his proximity to the garden, his feud with Reginald, all pointed to his involvement. Yet the butler's unease and the ledger's entry suggested another hand at play. And the shadowed figure Victor, Grayson, or someone else entirely. The key, the crest, the poison, all were threads in a tapestry. Poirot was determined to unravel. As the candle burned low, Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming. "The game, it is afoot," he whispered. "And Hercule Poirot, he does not lose." The chapter closed with Poirot resolved to visit the apothecary again at dawn, to confront Grayson, and to decode the astrological chart fully. The shadows in the library had revealed much, but the truth lay deeper still, waiting in the stars. Chapter 4. The midnight waltz. The air at Ravenwood Manor thrummed with anticipation, a heady mix of perfume, candle wax, and secrets. The second masked ball, announced under the guise of maintaining the manor's festive facade, had drawn an even larger crowd than the first. The grand ballroom, with its vaulted ceilings and chandeliers dripping with crystal, sparkled under the golden glow of 1,000 lights. Guests swirled in silks and velvets, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks, peacocks, wolves, and gilded skulls, each a shield for the truths they dared not reveal. Hercule Poirot, clad in an understated yet impeccably tailored black suit. With a simple silver mask, stood at the edge of the dance floor, his sharp gray eyes scanning the kaleidoscope of movement. The scream from the first ball still echoed in his mind, a discordant note in the otherwise harmonious rhythm of Ravenwood's. Opulence. The unconscious guest, a young woman named Miss Beatrice Langley, had recovered enough to speak, though her words were fragmented, haunted by mentions of a shadowed figure. Poirot's discovery of a rare poison extract of belladonna on the torn velvet sheet clutched had narrowed his focus to those with access to the manor's apothecary. Yet the dropped locket with its unfamiliar crest, found near the scene, gnawed at him. Its intricate design, a serpent coiled around a star, hinted at a deeper history, one the manor's walls seemed eager to conceal. Tonight, Poirot's mission was clear: observe, probe, and provoke. The ball was a stage, and he intended to nudge the players into revealing their roles. He sipped a glass of champagne, the bubbles sharp against his tongue, and let his gaze drift to Lord Reginald Hawthorne, the manor's host. Reginald, resplendent in a crimson doublet and a lion's mask, moved with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to command. Yet there was a tightness in his jaw, a flicker of unease as he greeted guests. Across the room, his wife, Lady Eleanor, glided in a gown of emerald silk, her swan mask gleaming with pearls. Her laughter rang out, bright but brittle, as she danced with a young viscount. Poirot noted the way her eyes darted toward a figure in the shadows. Victor Hawthorne, Reginald's estranged cousin, whose fox mask did little to hide the predatory glint in his eyes. Victor had been a thorn in Poirot's thoughts since the first encounter. The man's sharp tongue and veiled hostility toward Reginald suggested motives beyond mere familial discord. Poirot had overheard whispers of a disputed inheritance, a wound that festered beneath the manor's polished surface. Victor's presence at the apothecary on the night of the attack, as hinted by the groundskeeper's nervous glances, only deepened Poirot's suspicions. Tonight he would test Victor's composure as the orchestra struck up a waltz. Poirot set down his glass and approached Lady Eleanor, who had just parted from her dance partner. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, "may I have the honor of this dance? Hercule Poirot, at your service." Eleanor's eyes widened behind her mask, but she recovered quickly, offering a gracious smile. "Monsieur Poirot, I've heard of your reputation. I'd be delighted." They joined the whirl of dancers, Poirot's movements precise and measured, his hand light on her waist. "This is a splendid affair," he remarked, his tone conversational but probing. "Yet I sense a certain tension beneath the revelry. Tell me, Lady Eleanor, do you find all your guests as charming as they appear?" Her laughter was a delicate chime, but her grip on his shoulder tightened. "You're perceptive, monsieur. A ball like this attracts all sorts, some more sincere than others. But Reginald insists on hospitality, even for those who test it. Such as your husband's cousin, Victor?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost lost in the music, but he felt her stiffen. I could not help but notice his intensity. "A man with a purpose, perhaps?" Eleanor's smile faltered, and she glanced toward Victor, who now stood near a marble pillar, engaged in a heated exchange with a masked woman in sapphire blue. "Victor is complicated," she said carefully. "He and Reginald have never seen eye to eye. Old family quarrels, you understand. Old quarrels can cast long shadows," Poirot mused, guiding her through a turn. "And sometimes they hide new dangers. The incident with Miss Langley, for instance. A most curious affair." Eleanor's step faltered, but she recovered with a practiced grace. "A dreadful thing," she murmured. "The poor girl. We're all shaken." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yet I wonder if the poison that felled her was meant for another. A warning, perhaps, or a miscalculation? Her lips parted, but before she could respond, the music swelled, and Poirot spun her gently, releasing her to the next partner in the dance's intricate pattern. He stepped back, his mind already sifting through her reaction. Eleanor knew more than she let on, and her unease around Victor was palpable. But was it fear, guilt, or something else entirely? As the dance continued, Poirot's attention shifted to Victor, whose argument with the woman in sapphire had grown more animated. She gestured sharply, her voice low but cutting, and Poirot caught the glint of a ring on her finger, a serpent coiled around a star, identical to the locket's crest. His pulse quickened. The woman turned, her mask slipping slightly to reveal a sharp cheekbone and a strand of auburn hair. Before Poirot could approach, she vanished into the crowd, leaving Victor alone, his fists clenched. Poirot made his way toward Victor, weaving through the dancers with the agility of a man half his age. But as he neared, a commotion at the edge of the ballroom drew his attention. A young footman, flustered and red-faced, was struggling to balance a tray of glasses. One slipped, shattering on the floor, and in the chaos, Poirot glimpsed a flash of white a handkerchief, embroidered with the same serpent and star crest, fluttering to the ground near Victor's feet. Victor, unaware, stepped over it, his focus on the retreating figure of this sapphire-clad woman. Poirot retrieved the handkerchief, its silk soft against his fingers, and tucked it into his pocket. The crest was no coincidence. It was a thread in the tapestry of this mystery, and he intended to pull it until the pattern emerged. He approached Victor, who was now sipping a glass of brandy, his fox mask tilted slightly, revealing a smirk. "Monsieur." "Victor," Poirot said, his tone polite but firm. "A word, if you please." Victor's smirk faded, replaced by a wary glint. "Poirot, isn't it? The detective who fancies himself a bloodhound." "What do you want?" "A moment of your time," Poirot replied, undeterred. "I am curious about your discussion with the lady in blue." It seemed rather spirited. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Eavesdropping, were you?" "It was nothing. A misunderstanding between old friends." "Friends?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Or perhaps allies in a shared cause." I could not help but notice her ring. A striking design, much like a certain locket found after Miss Langley's misfortune. Victor's hand tightened around his glass, but his voice remained steady. "You see conspiracies everywhere, don't you? That locket could belong to anyone. This manor is crawling with trinkets and secrets." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. "But secrets have a way of unmasking themselves, especially when one knows where to look. Tell me, monsieur, where were you when Miss Langley was struck down?" Victor's laugh was sharp, almost a bark. "You think I'd stoop to poisoning some debutante? I was here, dancing, drinking, like everyone else. Ask anyone." "I intend to," Poirot said, his gaze unwavering. "And I suspect the answers will be most illuminating." Before Victor could retort, the orchestra paused, and a bell chimed, signaling the midnight waltz, the centerpiece of the evening. Couples paired off, their masks glinting under the chandeliers as they took their places. Poirot stepped back, letting Victor melt into the crowd, but his mind was alight with possibilities. The handkerchief, the locket, the ring all bore the chi. Same crest, a symbol that tied the sapphire-clad woman to the attack. And Victor's defensiveness only deepened Poirot's resolve to confront him again. But with more leverage. As the waltz began, Poirot moved to the balcony overlooking the ballroom, where he could observe without being seen. The dancers spun. Below, a mesmerizing swirl of color and motion. But his eyes were drawn to a figure lingering near the refreshment table, the groundskeeper, Mr. Thomas Finch, whose nervous demeanor had caught Poirot's attention earlier. Finch was no guest, yet here he was, dressed in a borrowed suit, his eyes darting toward the apothecary door at the far end of the hall. Poirot descended the stairs, his steps silent, and approached Finch, who nearly dropped his glass at the sight of him. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot said softly, "you seem ill at ease. Is the splendor of the ball too much, or is it something else that troubles you?" Finch's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "Just enjoying the evening, sir. Not used to all this." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "Yet I wonder if your presence here has more to do with the apothecary than the festivities. You were seen near it the night Miss Langley was attacked. Care to explain?" Finch's face paled, and he glanced toward Victor, who was now dancing with a new partner, oblivious to their conversation. I didn't do nothing wrong," Finch stammered. "I was just checking the locks, like always, but I saw someone. Not sure who. They were quick, like they didn't want to be seen." "Someone with a purpose," Poirot said, his voice low. "And perhaps a key to the apothecary? Tell me, Monsieur Finch, did this figure wear a ring or carry anything distinctive?" Finch hesitated, then nodded. "A ring, maybe. Couldn't see it clear, but it glinted. And they dropped something looked like a bit of cloth. I didn't touch it." Poirot's hand brushed the handkerchief in his pocket. "A wise choice," he said, "but silence can be as dangerous as action. If you recall anything more, you will find me most attentive." Finch nodded, his eyes wide, and Poirot let him slip away, his mind racing. The handkerchief, the ring, the locket all pointed to a conspiracy, one that Victor seemed to anchor. But the sapphire-clad woman was a new piece in the puzzle, her identity as elusive as the shadows she seemed to inhabit. Poirot needed to find her, and he needed to do it before the night's end dot. As the waltz reached its crescendo, Poirot returned to the ballroom, his gaze sweeping the crowd. The sapphire-clad woman was nowhere to be seen, but Victor was now speaking with Lord Reginald near the grand staircase, their voices low but tense. Poirot edged closer, catching fragments of their conversation. "You can't keep pretending it doesn't exist," Victor hissed. "The claim is real, Reginald, and I'll prove it." Reginald's voice was cold, controlled. "You're chasing ghosts, Victor. Let it go, or you'll regret it." Poirot filed the exchange away, his suspicions about the inheritance dispute sharpening. But before he could intervene, a soft hand touched his arm. He turned to find Miss Clara, the governess, her plain gray mask doing little to hide her sharp intelligence. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I've seen something you should know about. In the East Wing, near the old portrait gallery. It's unsettling." Poirot's interest piqued. Clara had proven observant, her quiet demeanor masking a keen mind. "Lead the way, mademoiselle," he said, following her through a side door into the manor's dimly lit corridors. The East Wing was a stark contrast to the ballroom's opulence. Dust motes danced in the moonlight, streaming through tall, narrow windows, and the air carried the musty scent of neglect. Clara led him to a portrait of a stern-faced woman, her eyes painted with an almost lifelike intensity. At the base of the frame, partially hidden by a velvet curtain, was a small locked box, its surface etched with the serpent and star crest. "I found it this morning," Clara whispered. "I didn't touch it, but it doesn't belong here. The servants avoid this wing. They say it's cursed." Poirot examined the box, his fingers tracing the crest. "Cursed or not, mademoiselle, this box holds answers. But opening it will require care, and perhaps a key we do not yet possess." As they returned to the ballroom, the clock struck midnight, the chimes reverberating through the manor. The waltz ended, and the guests applauded, their masks gleaming like stars in the candlelight. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, fixed on the box, the crest, and Victor's heated words. The night was far from over, and he resolved to confront Victor again, this time with the weight of new evidence. He found Victor near the apothecary door, his fox mask now removed, revealing a face taut with frustration. "Monsieur Victor," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding, "we must speak again, and this time I suggest you choose your words with care. The shadows of Ravenwood are beginning to speak, and they point to you." Victor's eyes flashed, but he said nothing, his silence as telling as any confession. Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, the certainty that he was closing in on the truth. The midnight waltz had ended, but the dance of deception was far from over, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until every mask was removed. Chapter 5. The Gardener's Secret. The morning sun spilled over Ravenwood Manor's sprawling gardens, painting the dew-kissed roses in hues of gold and crimson. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, strolled along the gravel path, his polished shoes crunching softly. His gray eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the meticulously trimmed hedges and vibrant flower beds. But his mind was elsewhere on the torn velvet, the rare poison, and the elusive Victor Hawthorne. The events of the previous night's ball still lingered, particularly the handkerchief embroidered with that curious crest, a tantalizing thread in the tapestry of mystery he was determined to unravel. Poirot's destination was the gardener's shed, a modest structure tucked behind a curtain of ivy at the garden's edge. The groundskeeper, a wiry man named Thomas Grimsby, had caught his attention during the ball. Grimsby's nervous glances and hurried movements as he tended to spilled wine and scattered petals had not escaped Poirot's notice. There was something about the man, a flicker of unease, perhaps guilt, that suggested he knew more than he let on. And with the apothecary, where the rare poison had been sourced, located near the gardens, Grimsby was a logical piece of the puzzle. The shed door creaked as Poirot pushed it open, revealing a cluttered interior. Shovels and rakes leaned against walls, lined with shelves of jars, dried herbs, seeds, and peculiar powders. The air smelled of earth and something sharper, almost medicinal. Grimsby stood at a workbench, his back to Poirot, sorting through a pile of wilted leaves. He stiffened at the sound of the door, his hands pausing mid-task. "Monsieur Grimsby," Poirot said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of authority. "I trust I am not interrupting your important work?" Grimsby turned, his weathered face tightening. He was in his late 50s, with a graying beard and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. "Mr. Poirot," he mumbled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect you here. Just tending to the plants, you know." Poirot's mustache twitched as he smiled, stepping closer. "We, the plants. They are most splendid, a testament to your skill. But I am not here to discuss roses, non. I wish to speak of the night of the masked ball and what you saw, or perhaps what you did not see." Grimsby's hands trembled slightly, and he busied himself with a trowel. "Don't know much about that, sir. I was outside, mostly, keeping the paths clear, checking the lanterns." "Indeed?" Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "Yet I observed you, Monsieur Grimsby, near the apothecary door, just before the screen. A curious place for a gardener to linger, is it not?" The trowel slipped from Grimsby's hand, clattering onto the workbench. He cursed under his breath, then met Poirot's eyes, his expression a mix of defiance and fear. "I don't know what you're getting at, Mr. Poirot. I was just doing my job." Poirot stepped closer, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. Come, monsieur. Hercule Poirot does not accuse without reason. You were seen, and I suspect you saw something or someone near the apothecary. Perhaps a figure slipping in or out. A man, perhaps, with a motive to harm." Grimsby's jaw tightened, and he glanced toward the shed's small window, as if expecting someone to be watching. "You're a clever one, aren't you?" he muttered. "All right, I'll tell you something, but you didn't hear it from me. I don't want trouble." Poirot nodded, his expression encouraging but firm. "You have my discretion, monsieur. Speak, and let us bring light to this shadow." Grimsby hesitated, then leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. It was Victor Hawthorne. "I saw him that night, skulking near the apothecary just before the commotion started. He looked furtive, like he didn't want to be seen. I didn't think much of it at first, families always poking around the manor, but then I heard about the guest and that poison." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Victor, you say? Most interesting. And why, Monsieur Grimsby, did you not report this to the authorities? Or to Lord Reginald?" Grimsby's darkened, and he looked away, his fingers twisting the rag. "He paid me," he admitted, his voice thick with shame. "Victor came to me after, slipped me a wad of notes, more than I make in a month. Told me to keep quiet, said it was just a misunderstanding. I've got a daughter, Mr. Poirot, and doctors' bills don't pay themselves. I took the money." Poirot's expression remained unreadable, though his mind raced. Victor's presence near the apothecary, combined with the bribe, painted a damning picture. Yet something nagged at him, the ease of Grimsby's confession, the way it tied Victor so neatly to the crime. Poirot's little gray cells hummed, warning him that the truth was rarely so straightforward. "You are wise to speak now, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone softening. "But tell me, did you see Victor enter the apothecary? Or perhaps take something from it?" Grimsby shook his head. "No, I didn't see him go in. Just saw him near the door, looking shifty. I was pruning the hedges nearby, and he didn't notice me. But I swear, that's all I know." Poirot studied the gardener, noting the sweat beading on his brow despite the cool morning. "Very well," he said at last. "I shall require your testimony, Monsieur Grimsby, should the need arise. You will not speak of this to anyone, we? Not even to Victor?" Grimsby nodded quickly, relief flooding his face. "I won't say a word, Mr. Poirot. You have my promise." As Poirot turned to leave, he paused, his eyes catching a small jar on the shelf, its label faded but legible. Belladonna. The same. Rare poison found on the torn velvet. He made a mental note to return later, perhaps with a warrant, to examine the apothecary's contents more thoroughly. For now, Victor's involvement was a significant step forward, but Poirot sensed the web of deceit extended further, perhaps entangling others within Ravenwood's walls. The gravel crunched underfoot as Poirot made his way back to the manor, the morning air now heavy with the promise of rain. His thoughts churned, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. Victor's presence near the apothecary, the bribe to Grimsby, the handkerchief with the crest, all pointed to a calculated scheme. But why attack a guest? And what of the locket, with its unfamiliar emblem? Poirot's instincts told him Victor was a key player, but not the only one. Back at the manor, the breakfast room buzzed with the subdued chatter of guests, their masks now replaced by guarded expressions. Lord Reginald Hawthorne sat at the head of the table, his face drawn, while Lady Eleanor, his wife, picked at her food, her eyes darting nervously. Poirot took a seat, accepting a cup of tea from a maid, and observed the room. Victor was conspicuously absent, which only heightened Poirot's suspicions. "Mr. Poirot," Reginald called, his voice strained but polite. "I trust you're finding Ravenwood to your liking, despite recent events?" Poirot sipped his tea, his gaze steady. "The manor is most charming, Lord Hawthorne, but it is the secrets within its walls that fascinate me most. Tell me, where is your cousin Victor this morning?" A hush fell over the table. Reginald's fork paused mid-air, and Eleanor's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Victor?" Reginald said, recovering quickly. "He's likely sleeping in. He's not one for early mornings." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. He made a mental note to seek Victor out, perhaps in his quarters, to gauge his reaction to Grimsby's revelation. As breakfast concluded, Poirot slipped away to the manor's east wing, where the guest rooms were located. Victor's door was ajar, and a faint rustling came from within. Poirot knocked lightly, then pushed the door open, revealing Victor packing a small valise with hurried movements. The man froze, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight of Poirot. "Mr. Poirot," Victor said, forcing a smile. "To what do I owe this visit?" Poirot stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Monsieur Victor, I am a man who values clarity. You were seen near the apothecary on the night of the attack. A most curious place for a stroll, non? Perhaps you would care to explain?" Victor's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, tossing a shirt into the valise. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was at the ball, dancing, drinking same as everyone else." The rain had begun in earnest, cloaking the manor in a gray mist. Poirot returned to the gardens, his umbrella shielding him as he made his way to the apothecary. The small stone building, nestled among ancient oaks, was locked, but Poirot had procured a key from the housekeeper under the pretense of inspecting the manor's historical features. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs and chemicals. Shelves lined the walls, filled with vials and jars, each labeled. In neat script, Poirot's eyes scanned the rows until they landed on a small, dusty bottle marked Belladonna. He donned a pair of gloves, always prepared. The meticulous detective and carefully examined the bottle. A faint smudge on the glass suggested recent handling, and the cork was slightly loose. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no coincidence. He tucked the bottle into a silk pouch for later analysis, then continued his search, finding a ledger tucked behind a stack of jars. The pages detailed the apothecary's inventory, but several entries were scratched out, including one for Belladonna, dated the night of the ball. As Poirot closed the ledger, a shadow moved outside the window, a fleeting glimpse of a figure in a dark coat. He hurried to the door, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the rain and mist. A chill ran through him, not from the cold, but from the realization that someone was watching, perhaps aware of his progress. Was it Victor? Or another player in this intricate game? Back in the manor, Poirot sought out Miss Clara, the governess he had noticed at the ball, for her keen observation and quiet demeanor. She was in the nursery, reading to the Hawthorne children, her voice steady despite the storm outside. Poirot waited until the children were distracted, then approached her. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said softly, "I believe you have a sharp mind, one that sees what others miss. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual about Victor Hawthorne? Or perhaps the apothecary?" Clara's eyes widened slightly, but she composed herself. "You're direct, Mr. Poirot. I did see something odd. The night of the ball, I was in the garden, fetching a shawl for one of the children. I saw Victor near the apothecary, talking to a man I didn't recognize. They were whispering, and Victor handed him something small, like a vial. I didn't think much of it then, but after the attack..." Poirot's pulse quickened. "This man, can you describe him?" "Tall, thin, with a scar on his left cheek," Clara said. "He wasn't a guest, I'm sure of it. He moved like he didn't belong, always looking over his shoulder." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the new information. "You have done well, mademoiselle. If you see this man again, you will tell me at once, oui?" Clara agreed, and Poirot left the nursery, his thoughts a whirlwind. A second witness, a mysterious stranger, and a vial exchanged in the dark. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture remained incomplete. He needed to confront Victor again, but first he would secure the Belladonna bottle and Clara's testimony. The net was tightening, and Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase. as the day drew to a close. The storm intensified, lightning illuminating Ravenwood's towers. Poirot sat in his room, the bottle of belladonna on his desk, its contents. A silent accusation. Victor's bribe to Grimsby, his presence at the apothecary, and now Clara's account of a clandestine meeting, all pointed to his guilt. Yet Poirot's instincts warned him of a deeper layer, a hidden hand guiding the events. The stranger with the scar, the scratched-out ledger entries, the shadowed figure in the rain. Someone else was at play, and Poirot would not rest until he unmasked them. The chapter closed with Poirot penning a note to the local constable, requesting discreet assistance in monitoring Victor's movements. He sealed the letter, his lips curving into a determined smile. The gardener's secret had cracked the case open, but the true mastermind remained in the shadows. Hercule Poirot, however, was not a man to be outwitted. The game was afoot, and he would see it through to its cunning conclusion. Chapter 6. The locked room. The air in Ravenwood Manor hung heavy with the scent of wax and roses, a cloying perfume that clung to the velvet drapes and seeped into the polished oak floors. Hercule Poirot, his small, precise steps echoing faintly, in the cavernous hallway, paused before a door unlike the others. It was not the ornate mahogany of the guest chambers, nor the gilded panels of the ballroom, but a sturdy, unadorned slab of wood, its iron lock glinting dully in the flickering light of a sconce. This was the locked room, whispered about by the staff in hushed tones, a place even Lord Reginald Hawthorne seemed to avoid. And now it was no longer locked. Poirot's gray eyes narrowed as he examined the doorframe. The lock was intact, but the latch bore fresh scratches, minute but unmistakable, as though someone had coaxed it open with a tool not meant for the task. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, a habit when his mind began to weave its intricate web, and pushed the door inward. It creaked, revealing a chamber shrouded in shadow, its air thick with dust and secrets. The room was a relic of another era. Shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of leather-bound tomes and yellowed manuscripts. A single window, its panes clouded with grime, let in a sliver of moonlight that danced across a cluttered desk. Papers were strewn about, drawers yanked open, their contents spilling onto the floor. A ransacked room, Poirot noted, but not chaotically so. The intruder had been searching for something specific. He stepped inside, his patent leather shoes silent on the threadbare rug. His gaze swept the scene, cataloging details with the precision of a watchmaker. A candelabrum lay toppled, its wax pooling on the desk. A quill pen, its nib bent, rested beside an inkwell that had bled black across a ledger. And there, tucked beneath a crumpled sheet of parchment, was something that made Poirot's mustache twitch. A note, scrawled in a hurried hand. The truth lies in the stars. Poirot lifted the note, holding it to the light. The paper was fine, the ink fresh, suggesting it had been written recently, perhaps that very night. He murmured to himself, "The stars, mon Dieu, a poetic flourish or a deliberate clue?" His mind, ever agile, began to turn over possibilities. The phrase could be metaphorical, a reference to destiny or fame, but Poirot's instincts leaned toward something more tangible. Ravenwood Manor was steeped in history, and its library had already yielded secrets and astrological chart among them. Could this note point to it? He pocketed the note and began a methodical search of the room. The shelves held volumes on botany, heraldry, and arcane philosophy, but nothing immediately relevant. A brass telescope, its lens cracked, stood in a corner, suggesting an interest in the heavens, though it had not been used in years. Poirot's fingers traced the edge of a bookshelf, pausing at a faint groove. He pressed, and a panel clicked, revealing a hidden drawer. Inside was a single item, a brass key, its head engraved with a crescent moon. Interesant, Poirot whispered, turning the key in his hand. It was too small for the room's door, too ornate for a common lock. He slipped it into his waistcoat pocket, his thoughts racing. The key, the note, the ransacked room, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. Yet, a faint sound broke his reverie, a shuffle, barely audible, from the hallway. Poirot froze, his senses sharp. He extinguished the candle he'd lit and moved to the door, peering through the crack. A shadow flitted past, too quick to identify, but the rustle of fabric suggested a cloak or gown. Someone else was awake in Ravenwood Manor, and they were not meant to be. Poirot stepped into the hallway, his eyes scanning the dim corridor. The manor was a labyrinth at night, its passages twisting like the motives of its inhabitants. He followed, the sound, his steps silent, until he reached the grand staircase. Below, in the foyer, a figure paused, their silhouette framed by the moonlight streaming through a stained glass window. It was a woman, her hair pinned in an elegant chignon, her movements hesitant. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne. Poirot descended the stairs, his approach deliberate. "Madame," he called softly, his voice carrying just enough to startle her. She turned, her face pale, her eyes wide with something akin to fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she gasped, clutching a shawl to her chest. "You startled me. What are you doing wandering the manor at this hour?" Poirot smiled, his expression disarming. "One might ask the same of you, Lady Eleanor. The night is late, and yet you are not in your chambers." Her lips tightened, but she recovered quickly. "I couldn't sleep. The events of the past days, they weigh heavily." "Indeed," Poirot said, stepping closer. "And yet I find you near a room that has been, shall we say, disturbed. A locked room, no longer locked, its contents scattered. Do you know anything of this?" Her eyes flickered, a telltale sign. "I know nothing of any locked room," she said, too quickly. "I was merely taking a walk." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "A walk, in the dead of night, past a room that holds secrets? Non, 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 madame. Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. Perhaps you were looking for something, or someone." Lady Eleanor's composure faltered, her hands twisting. "The shawl. You accuse me, Monsieur Poirot. I am the lady of this house." "I accuse no one," Poirot said smoothly. "I observe, and I observe that you are troubled. If you know something of the locked room, or of a note that speaks of stars, it would be wise to share it. Secrets, madame, have a way of unraveling." She hesitated, her gaze darting to the shadows. I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Before Poirot could press further, a distant thud echoed through the manor, followed by the faint clatter of glass. Lady Eleanor flinched, and Poirot's instincts flared. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving toward the sound. It came from the direction of the library, a place he had explored only the day before. He hurried through the corridors, his mind racing. The library, the astrological chart, the note about stars, were they connected? And why was Lady Eleanor, a woman of poise and privilege, skulking about like a thief? The library doors were ajar when he arrived. Moonlight spilled across the room, illuminating the towering shelves and the long table where the astrological chart lay, undisturbed since his last visit. But something was amiss. A window, previously latched, now stood open, its curtains swaying in the night breeze. And on the floor, glinting in the moonlight, was a shard of glass, part of a broken vial. Poirot knelt, careful not to touch the shard. It was small, barely an inch long, but its edges were stained with a faint greenish residue. Poison, perhaps, or a chemical meant to obscure evidence. He straightened, his mind piecing together fragments. The locked room, the note, the vial all pointed to a deliberate act, not random vandalism. Someone was covering their tracks, but who? A soft creak behind him made Poirot turn. Miss Clara, the governess, stood in the doorway, her nightgown clutched tightly, her eyes wide with alarm. "Monsieur Poirot, I heard a noise," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought it was the wind, but then I saw you." "Miss Clara," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, "you have a habit of appearing at opportune moments. Tell me, what do you know of this library, of a chart that maps the stars?" Her brow furrowed, but she stepped inside, her gaze falling on the astrological chart. "That old thing? It's been here for years. Something Lord Reginald's father was obsessed with. He thought it held the key to the family's fortune. But it's just a relic." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A relic, perhaps, but one that someone finds valuable. Tell me, have you seen anyone near this library tonight? Or near the locked room upstairs?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I saw Victor earlier, skulking about the west wing. He looked furtive. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now—" "Victor," Poirot repeated, his voice low. The estranged cousin, always at the edges of this mystery, his motives as murky as the manor's shadows. "Thank you, Miss Clara. You have been most helpful. Now, return to your room. The night is not safe for wandering." She nodded and retreated, leaving Poirot alone with the chart. He spread it across the table, its intricate lines and symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. The chart was a masterpiece of celestial cartography, its constellations meticulously drawn, each labeled with dates and cryptic annotations. One caught his eye, a star marked with the date, June 12, 1895. It was circled in red ink. A recent edition. Poirot's mind raced. June 12, 1895. A date tied to a past tragedy, perhaps? The Hawthorne family had a history of misfortune, deaths, disappearances, rumors of a curse. He recalled the letters he'd found in the library's hidden compartment, hinting at a scandal that had rocked the family decades ago. Could the chart be a map to that truth? He spent the next hour poring over the chart, his fingers tracing the lines of constellations. The note's words echoed in his mind. The truth lies in the stars. He began to see patterns, not just in the stars, but in the annotations. Numbers, disguised as celestial coordinates, formed a sequence. He scribbled them down, his pencil flying across a scrap of paper. 37129. A code, perhaps, or a combination. The manor was silent now, the thud and clatter long faded, but Poirot's pulse quickened. He returned to the locked room, the brass key still in his pocket. The desk, he realized, had a locked drawer he hadn't noticed before, its keyhole shaped like a crescent moon. With a steady hand, he inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying click. Inside the drawer was a small, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the faded script. It belonged to Lord Reginald's father, detailing his obsession with the astrological chart and a hidden vault somewhere in the manor. The journal spoke of a family secret, a fortune tied to a starlit truth, varied to protect the Hawthorne. Name. The final entry, dated June 12, 1895, was chilling. The vault must remain sealed, lest the curse claim us all. Poirot closed the journal, his mind alight with possibilities. The vault, the chart, the code, it was all connected. The ransacked room, the broken vial, Victor's furtive movements, Lady Eleanor's unease, each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. But who was pulling the strings? Victor, with his vendetta against Reginald? The butler, whose loyalty seemed unshakable yet oddly intense? Or someone else, hidden in plain sight? As dawn broke, painting the manor in hues of gold, Poirot stood at the library window, the chart spread before him. He had deciphered part of its secret, but the full truth remained elusive. The code 3-7-12-9 pointed to something tangible, a vault or a document. And the note, "The truth lies in the stars," was no metaphor. It was a guide. He turned from the window, his resolve hardened. The next ball was tomorrow night, and Poirot knew it would be his chance to unmask the culprit. Victor would be there, as would Lady Eleanor, the butler, and the mysterious groundskeeper. The stars, it seemed, were aligning, and Hercule Poirot would follow their light to the truth. Chapter 7. The lady's confession. The air in Ravenwood Manor hung heavy with the scent of wax and roses, the chandeliers casting their golden glow across the ballroom's polished floors. Hercule Poirot stood in a shadowed alcove, his sharp eyes scanning the swirl of masked dancers. The third ball was in full swing, a masquerade of secrets as much as costumes, and Poirot felt the weight of the mystery pressing against his temples. The unconscious guest, the poisoned velvet, the cryptic astrological chart, each clue was a thread in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. But tonight his focus was on Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, whose fleeting glances and nervous gestures betrayed a heart burdened with guilt. Poirot adjusted his body, his mustache twitching as he considered his next move. The previous night's discoveries in the library had sharpened his instincts. The astrological chart, partially decoded, pointed to a date etched in the Hawthorne family's past, a tragedy that lingered like a ghost in these walls. The dropped handkerchief with its embroidered crest, matching the locket from the first ball, had led him to suspect Lady Eleanor's involvement in something deeper than mere social intrigue. And then there was Victor, Lord Reginald's estranged cousin, whose heated words with Eleanor at the midnight waltz had not escaped Poirot's notice. The gardener's testimony had further tightened the noose around Victor, but Poirot sensed the web extended beyond one man's ambition. He stepped from the alcove, weaving through the crowd with the grace of a man who knew his purpose. The orchestra played a lilting waltz, and masked figures spun in pairs, their laughter a fragile mask over the manor's tension. Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Eleanor, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue, her mask adorned with silver filigree. She stood near a marble pillar, her fan fluttering like a trapped bird. Beside her, Lord Reginald, her husband, was engrossed in conversation with a portly gentleman in a peacock-feathered mask. This was his moment. "Lady Eleanor," Poirot said, his voice low but firm as he approached. "A word, if you please." Her fan stilled, and her eyes visible through the slits of her mask widened briefly before narrowing. "Monsieur Poirot," she replied, her tone polished but strained. "This is hardly the time for conversation. The ball is in full swing. Yet time, it is a luxury we cannot afford," Poirot said, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence to his words. "The events of these nights, they weigh heavily, non? A guest poisoned, a room ransacked, a note speaking of stars. I believe you have knowledge that may illuminate these shadows." Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound emerged. She glanced at her husband, still distracted, then back at Poirot. "You are mistaken, sir. I know nothing of such matters." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with the quiet confidence of a man who had already seen through her facade. "The handkerchief, Madame, the crest upon it matches the locket found near our unfortunate guest. And your conversation with Monsieur Victor last night, it was not the exchange of mere pleasantries." Her fan snapped shut, and she took a step back, her gown rustling against the floor. "You overstep, Monsieur Poirot. My conversations are my own." "Perhaps," Poirot said, undeterred. "But secrets, they have a way of escaping, like moths from a lantern. Permit me to assist you before they burn you." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the swell of the orchestra. Then Eleanor's shoulders sagged, and She gestured toward a curtained alcove near the ballroom's edge. "Very well," she whispered. "But not here." Poirot followed her through the velvet curtains into a small antechamber, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced hawthorns. A single candelabrum flickered, casting long shadows that danced like conspirators. Eleanor removed her mask, revealing a face pale with worry, her green eyes darting to the door as if expecting pursuit. "Speak, madame," Poirot said, his voice gentle but insistent. "The truth. It is a burden best shared." Eleanor clasped her hands, her fingers twisting the sapphire ring on her left hand. "You must understand, Monsieur Poirot. I never meant for any of this. I am caught in a trap not of my making." "A trap?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Of whose design?" She hesitated, then spoke in a rush, as if the words had been damned too low. "Victor, he knows something about me. Something that could ruin me, ruin Reginald, ruin everything we've built here at Ravenwood." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "And what is this secret, madame, that gives Victor such power?" Eleanor's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before I married Reginald, I was not always the lady you see. Now, there was a man, a painter, in Paris. We were close, too close. Victor discovered letters we exchanged, letters I thought destroyed. He threatens to reveal them unless I aid him." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the implications. "And this aid, it involves what, precisely?" "He wants me to convince Reginald to sell Ravenwood," she said, her voice trembling. "Victor claims the estate should be his, that Reginald's father cheated his branch of the family. He says he has documents to prove it, hidden somewhere in the manor. I don't know where, but he's obsessed with finding them." Poirot's mustache twitched as he absorbed this. The documents in the hidden vault, hinted at by the astrological chart, now took on new significance. Victor's motives were not merely revenge, but a calculated bid for the estate itself. Yet Eleanor's confession raised another question. Was she a pawn, or was she playing a deeper game? And the attack on the guest? Poirot pressed. "The poison on the velvet? Do you know of this?" Eleanor shook her head vehemently. "No, I swear, I had no part in that. Victor spoke of creating a scandal, something to pressure Reginald, but I never imagined violence. I thought it was all threats, nothing more." Poirot studied her, his gray cells humming. Her fear seemed genuine, but her story was a delicate thread that could snap under scrutiny. "Madame, if you are innocent of the attack, why not tell your husband of Victor's blackmail? Why carry this burden alone?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she turned away, clutching the edge of a table. "Because Reginald would never forgive me. Those letters, they are not just words. They speak of promises I made, promises I broke. When the first chose Reginald, if he knew, it would break his heart. And Victor knows this. He thrives on my silence." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind mapping the connections. Victor's blackmail was a lever, but the poisoning suggested a second player, someone with access to the apothecary, and a motive yet to be uncovered. The ransacked room, the cryptic note about stars, these were not Victor's style, too theatrical, too indirect. Another hand was at work, and Poirot resolved to find it. "Very well, madame," he said, his tone softening. "I believe you wish to be free of this trap. But to do so, you must trust Hercule Poirot. Will you help me to ensnare Victor, to bring his schemes into the light?" Eleanor turned, her eyes searching his face. "What do you propose?" "A confrontation," Poirot said, his voice steady. "At the next ball, we will give Victor the opportunity to reveal himself. You will play your part, madame, but under my direction. We will stage a scene that forces his hand, and in doing so, we may uncover the truth of the poisoner as well." She hesitated, then nodded. I'll do it. But you must promise me, Monsieur Poirot, that Reginald will not see those letters. Poirot inclined his head. The little grey cells, they are discreet, madame. Your secret is safe, provided you speak the truth. As they returned to the ballroom, the music swelled, a triumphant crescendo that mirrored Poirot's rising anticipation. The plan was set, a trap for Victor, baited with Eleanor's cooperation. But as he watched her slip back into the crowd, her mask once more in place, Poirot's mind lingered on the poison, the velvet, the shadowed figure. The game was far from over, and the next ball would be the stage for a revelation or a betrayal. The night deepened, and Poirot retreated to his guest room, a modest chamber overlooking the manor's gardens. He sat at a small desk, his notebook open, his pen scratching as he recorded the evening's revelations. Eleanor's confession had shifted the puzzle, but pieces remained missing. The astrological chart, with its hidden date, pointed to a vault and documents that could confirm Victor's claim. But the poison rare, deliberate, and expertly administered suggested a mind more cunning than Victor's, a mind that thrived in the shadows. He sketched a timeline, his pen moving with precision. The first ball, the scream, the unconscious. Guessed, the torn velvet. The second ball, the heated exchange between Victor and Eleanor, the dropped handkerchief. The ransacked room, the note about stars. And now, Eleanor's admission of blackmail. Each event was a note in a symphony, but a conductor remained hidden. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Entrez," Poirot called, closing his notebook. Miss Clara, the governess, stepped inside, her plain gray dress a stark contrast to the ballroom's opulence. Her sharp eyes, unmasked, met his with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Monsieur?" "Poirot, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, mademoiselle," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. "You have something to share, non?" Clara sat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I couldn't help overhearing part of your conversation with Lady Eleanor. Not intentionally, of course, but the alcove curtains are thin, and voices carry." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And what did you hear, mademoiselle?" "Enough to know Victor is blackmailing her," Clara said, her voice steady. "And I think I can help. I've seen Victor meeting someone in the gardens, late at night. A man, not a guest, someone who moves like he knows the manor's secrets. I couldn't see his face, but he wore a cloak with a hood, and he spoke in whispers." Poirot leaned forward, his interest piqued. "When did you see this, mademoiselle?" "2 nights ago, after the second ball," Clara replied. "I was walking the grounds. Sometimes I can't sleep, and the gardens are peaceful. They were near the old fountain, hidden by the yew hedges." Victor handed the man something, a small packet, and the man slipped away toward the stables. Poirot's mind raced. A packet? Could it be the poison? Or something else? A payment? A document? "You are observant, Mademoiselle Clara. This is most valuable. Did you hear anything of their conversation?" "Only fragments," she admitted. "Something about the vault and the right moment. I didn't dare get closer." Poirot nodded, his gray cells aligning the new information. The vault again, tying back to the astrological chart. And this cloaked stranger an accomplice. Perhaps the poisoner himself. "You have done well to tell me this, mademoiselle. But you must be cautious. The man you saw, he is dangerous, and Victor's schemes are deeper than they appear." Clara's lips curved in a faint smile. "I'm not afraid, Monsieur Poirot. I've dealt with difficult men before. But I want this manor to be safe again, for the children I teach, for everyone. Your courage, it is admirable, Poirot." Sod rising. "I will need your eyes and ears, mademoiselle. At the next ball, watch Victor closely. Note who he speaks to, where he goes." but do not confront him. Leave that to Poirot." She nodded, standing. "I will. Good night, monsieur." As Clara left, Poirot returned to his notebook, adding her account to his timeline. The stranger in the cloak was a new variable, a shadow moving just beyond his grasp. He would need to tighten the trap, not just for Victor, but for this unknown accomplice. The next ball, he decided, would be a chessboard, and he would move his pieces with precision. The following morning, Poirot descended to the breakfast room, where the guests were gathered, their masks replaced by polite smiles that hid their unease. Lord Reginald presided at the head of the table, his jovial demeanor strained. Eleanor sat beside him, her eyes downcast, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Victor was absent, a fact that did not escape Poirot's notice. "Reginald, old chap, you look as if you've seen a ghost," said the portly gentleman from the previous night, now unmasked as Sir Henry Caldwell, a shipping magnate with a penchant for brandy. Reginald forced a laugh. "Just the strain of hosting, Henry. These balls are a devil to manage." Poirot sipped his coffee, observing the room. The guests were a mix of old money and new ambitions, each with motives that could tangle with Victor's schemes. Sir Henry, for instance, had investments tied to the Hawthorne estate. Might he benefit from its sale? And then there was Mrs. Lavinia Gray, a widow with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, who seemed to know more about the family's history than she let on dot as breakfast ended. Poirot approached Reginald, drawing him aside. "Monsieur Hawthorne, a moment. I understand your cousin Victor has been difficult. Might I ask about the nature of your estrangement?" Reginald's face darkened. Victor's always been a sore loser. "Our fathers quarreled over the estate years ago, some nonsense about inheritance rights. Victor's never let it go. He's been sniffing around Ravenwood for months, claiming he's owed something." "And these claims, they have merit?" Poirot asked, his tone neutral. "None," Reginald snapped. "The estate's been ours for generations. Victor's just stirring trouble, as always." Poirot nodded, filing away the information. Reginald's certainty was convincing, but the documents in the vault could tell a different story. He excused himself and sought out the library again, determined to decode the rest of the astrological chart before the next ball. The library was quiet, its shelves towering like silent sentinels. Poirot retrieved the chart from the hidden compartment, spreading it across a table. The symbols, intricate and arcane, seemed to pulse with meaning. He traced the lines, his mind working through the patterns. The date he'd uncovered pointed to a fire that had destroyed part of the manor decades ago, a tragedy that left Victor's father disinherited. But another symbol, a star within a circle, hinted at a location, a specific room, perhaps, or a marker in the grounds. Hours passed, the sunlight slanting through the windows as Poirot worked. At last he found it, a reference to the eastern wing, a part of the manor rarely used. The vault, he realized, must be there, hidden behind a wall or floor. He would need to search it, but not until he had Victor where he wanted him. That evening, as the manor prepared for the next ball, Poirot met with Eleanor in the rose garden, away from prying eyes. "Madame, tomorrow night you will tell Victor you have convinced Reginald to consider selling. You will say you need to see the documents to persuade him fully. He will take you to them, and I will be watching." Eleanor nodded, her face pale. "But resolute? And if he suspects?" "He will not," Poirot said firmly. "Victor is a man driven by greed, not caution. He will see only the prize." As they parted, Poirot felt the threads of the mystery tightening. The poisoner, the vault, the stranger in the cloak hall were converging on the next ball. He returned to his room, his mind alight with possibilities. The confession had been a breakthrough, but it was only the beginning. Victor's trap was set, but Poirot knew the true danger lay in the shadows, waiting to strike, The chapter closed with Poirot standing at his window, gazing at the moonlit gardens. The manor's secrets were unraveling, but the final unmasking was yet to come. Tomorrow he would play his hand, and Ravenwood Manor would reveal its truth or its treachery. Chapter 8. The stolen jewel, the air in Ravenwood Manor, buzzed with a restless energy as the third masked ball of the week unfolded. The grand ballroom, awash in the golden glow of chandeliers, shimmered with opulence. Crystal flutes clinked silk, gowns rustled, and the orchestra's waltz wove a spell over the guests, their faces hidden behind intricate masks of feathers, velvet, and gold. Yet beneath the revelry, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Hercule Poirot, his sharp gray eyes scanning the room, stood apart from the whirl of dancers, his mind a labyrinth of deductions. The events of the past days weighed heavily. The unconscious guest, the poisoned velvet, the cryptic astrological chart, and Lady Eleanor's confession of blackmail had drawn a tightening net around Victor Hawthorne, the estranged cousin of the manor's lord. But Poirot sensed the game was far from over. The manor's secrets were layered, each revelation peeling back only to reveal another shadow. Tonight, he was certain, something new would surface, something to tip the scales. He adjusted his bow. Tie, the crisp black of his evening suit, a stark contrast to the riot of colors around him. His mustache, meticulously waxed, twitched as he noted the subtle glances exchanged among the guests. The ball was a facade, a glittering distraction to maintain appearances after the attack at the first ball. Lord Reginald Hawthorne, the host, moved through the crowd with practiced charm, his silver mask glinting as he greeted a baroness. Lady Eleanor, his wife, floated nearby in a sapphire blue gown, her smile brittle as glass. Victor, the prime suspect, lingered near the refreshment table, his fox mask failing to hide the sharpness in his gaze. Poirot's attention, however, was drawn to the display case at the far end of the ballroom. Encased in glass on a pedestal, draped in black velvet, sat the Hawthorne sapphire, a gem the size of a quail's egg, its deep blue facets catching the light like a captive star. It was the pride of the Hawthorne family, a relic passed down through generations, rumored to carry a curse as old as the manor itself. Its presence tonight was deliberate, a statement of resilience after the chaos of the first ball. But to Poirot, it was a beacon, a lure for mischief. He sipped his champagne, the bubbles sharp on his tongue, and murmured to himself, "The sapphire, it is not merely a jewel. It is a magnet for greed, for envy, for chaos. And tonight, mon ami, it will draw the truth to the surface." As the orchestra swelled into a new waltz, Poirot's gaze darted to a disturbance near the case. A young woman in a peacock feather mask stumbled, her glass of wine splashing onto the floor. The crowd parted, and a footman rushed to clean the mess. In the brief commotion, Poirot's eyes narrowed. The display case, unattended for mere seconds now, stood empty. The sapphire was gone. A ripple of gasps spread through the room as others noticed. Lord Reginald's voice cut through the music, sharp and commanding. "Stop the orchestra! Seal the doors!" The waltz faltered, and the guests froze, their masks turning toward the empty case. Lady Eleanor clutched her husband's arm, her face pale beneath her mask. Victor, Poirot noted, stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain where you are. The sapphire has been taken, but the thief is still among us. Hercule Poirot will ensure this matter is resolved before the night is through." The crowd murmured, some indignant, others frightened. Reginald approached, his jaw tight. "Poirot, this is an outrage. That gem is irreplaceable. How could this happen under our noses?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. Under our noses, Monseigneur, is precisely where the cleverest crimes occur. But fear not, the little gray cells, they are already at work. He moved to the display case, his gloved hands careful not to touch the glass. The lock was intact, the hinges undisturbed. No signs of forced entry. The thief had been swift, precise, and likely familiar with the case's mechanism. Poirot's mind raced, cataloging the guests' positions during the wine spill distraction. The peacock-masked woman had been closest, but her stumble seemed genuine. Victor had been too far to act directly. The footman? Perhaps, but his role in cleaning the spill tied him to the aftermath, not the act itself. Poirot knelt, examining the floor. A faint scuff mark, barely noticeable, marred the polished wood near the pedestal. It was fresh, the shape suggesting a narrow heel, a man's shoe, perhaps, or a woman's with a distinctive sole. He filed this away, his gaze shifting to the crowd. Someone here had orchestrated this theft, and he suspected it was no mere act of greed. The sapphire's disappearance felt like a move in a larger game, a diversion to obscure Victor's schemes, or perhaps to implicate him further. "Lord Reginald," Poirot said, rising, "who has access to the key for this case?" Reginald frowned. "Only myself, Eleanor, and the butler, Mr. Grayson. The case is opened only for special occasions, and the key remains in my study." "And tonight, was it opened?" "No, it was secured before the ball began. I checked it myself." Poirot nodded, his mind turning to the butler. Grayson, a tall, gaunt man with a perpetually impassive face, had been absent during the theft, tending to the spilled wine. Or had he? Poirot recalled seeing him earlier, hovering near the case, adjusting a candelabra. A pretext, perhaps? "Mr. Grayson," Poirot called, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The butler appeared, his black suit immaculate, his silver mask revealing only his pale blue eyes. "You were near the case earlier, n'est-ce pas? Tell me, what did you observe?" Grayson's posture stiffened. "I was adjusting the lighting, sir." "The sapphire was in place then. I saw nothing unusual." "And during the commotion with the spilled wine?" "I was assisting the young lady, sir." "I didn't see the case." Poirot's smile was thin. "Of course. Merci, Mr. Grayson. You may return to your duties for now." The butler bowed and retreated, but Poirot's instincts prickled. Grayson's answers were too smooth, too rehearsed. He made a mental note to investigate the butler's movements further. For now, he needed to examine the case more closely. He requested Reginald's permission to inspect it privately, and the lord, though visibly shaken, agreed. In a small antechamber, Poirot donned a pair of magnifying spectacles and studied the case. The glass was flawless, no scratches or smudges. But on the velvet interior, he spotted something, a single fingerprint, faint but distinct, on the inner edge of the lid. It was not Reginald's, Eleanor's, or Grayson's, for their prints would be expected from routine handling. This print was an anomaly, a clue to an outsider's touch. Poirot's pulse quickened. "An outsider," he murmured, "or someone clever enough to appear as one." He recalled the groundskeeper's nervous testimony from earlier, hinting at Victor's presence near the apothecary. Could Victor have an accomplice, someone not on the guest list? The fingerprints suggested a new player, someone who had bypassed the lock with skill. Poirot's thoughts flickered to the locket and handkerchief, both bearing the unfamiliar crest. Perhaps the thief was connected to that symbol, a thread tying the attack, the blackmail, and now the theft. He returned to the ballroom, where the guests had been permitted to resume dancing, though the mood was strained. Reginald had stationed footmen at every exit, ensuring no one could leave without inspection. Poirot approached Lady Eleanor, who stood alone near a marble column, her fingers twisting a lace fan. "Madame," he said softly, "a word, if you please." The sapphire's theft, it is not an isolated act. Tell me, have you seen anyone unfamiliar tonight? Someone who does not belong among the guests? Eleanor's eyes darted to the crowd, then back to Poirot. I'm not sure. Everyone is masked, Mr. Poirot. It's impossible to tell. Yet you noticed Victor arguing with someone earlier, did you not? A man, perhaps, in a plain black. Mask? Her breath caught. How did you? Yes, I saw them near the terrace. I didn't recognize the other man. He was tall, with a slight limp. I thought it was a guest I hadn't met. Poirot's mind seized on the detail. A limp. The scuff mark's narrow heel could belong to someone with an uneven gait. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. He moved through the crowd, his eyes scanning for a tall figure with a limp. The masks made it challenging, but Poirot's memory was a steel trap. He recalled a guest in a plain black mask, hovering near the refreshment table earlier, his movements cautious, favoring one leg. The man was gone now, but Poirot spotted Victor slipping toward the terrace doors. With the agility of a cat, Poirot followed, keeping to the shadows. The terrace overlooked the manor's gardens, the moonlight casting eerie silhouettes across the hedges. Victor stood alone, his fox mask removed, his face taut with frustration. Poirot stepped forward, his voice low but firm. Monsieur Victor, a moment. You were seen speaking with a man tonight, one with a limp. Who is he? Victor spun, his eyes narrowing. Poirot, you're barking up the wrong tree. I've been here all night, playing the dutiful cousin. I don't know any limping men. Yet the sapphire is gone, and you, mon ami, have a habit of being near trouble. The locket, the handkerchief, the apothecary know this. Tell me, what is your game? Victor's laugh was bitter. You think I stole the sapphire? For what? To pawn it. I'd sooner burn this cursed manor down than touch that gem. Poirot studied him, noting the genuine anger in his voice. Victor was cunning, but this denial rang true. Still, his evasiveness about the limping man suggested he was hiding something. Then tell me about your companion, the one Lady Eleanor saw you with. Victor's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a shout echoed from the ballroom. Poirot turned, his instincts flaring. A footman was running toward them, his face pale. Mr. Poirot, Lord Reginald needs you. They've found something. Poirot hurried back, Victor trailing reluctantly. In the ballroom, Reginald stood near the display case, holding a small object, a silver key, its bow engraved with the same crest as the locket and handkerchief. It was under the pedestal, Reginald said, his voice shaking. It's not the case's key. I don't know where it came from. Poirot took the key, his fingers tracing the crest. This, Mies Amos, is no coincidence. The thief left it deliberately, a taunt or a clue. But to what? His mind raced. The key's crest linked it to the earlier clues, suggesting a deeper conspiracy. The limping man, the fingerprint, the key, all pointed to an outsider working with or against Victor. Poirot decided to set a trap. If the thief was still in the manor, they would be drawn to another prize, something irresistible. He turned to Reginald. Monseigneur, announced that the sapphire was a decoy, a replica, and that the true gem is in your study, under guard. Let us see who takes the bait. Reginald hesitated, then nodded. If you think it will work, Poirot. It will, because the thief is bold, but not reckless. They will want to confirm their prize. As Reginald made the announcement, Poirot positioned himself near the study, hidden behind a tapestry. The hours ticked by, the ball winding down, the guests dispersing. Just after 2 a.m., a figure approached the study door, a tall man, limping slightly, his black mask stark against his pale coat. He produced a tool, working the lock with practiced ease. Poirot stepped out, his voice sharp. "Arates, monsieur. The game is up." The man froze, then bolted, but Poirot had anticipated this. Footmen, alerted earlier, blocked the hall, apprehending the intruder. His mask removed, he was revealed as a stranger to the manor awiry. Man with a scar across his cheek, his limp pronounced. Poirot searched him, finding a small velvet pouch, but it was empty. The sapphire remained at large. "Who are you?" Poirot demanded. "And where is the jewel?" The man smirked, his voice low. "You're clever, Poirot, but you're late. The sapphire's gone, and you'll never find it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We shall see, mon ami. The night is not over." He escorted the man to a secure room, instructing the footman to guard him. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot gathered his thoughts. The limping man was likely Victor's accomplice, but the sapphire's whereabouts remained a mystery. The key's crest suggested a connection to the Hawthorne family's past, perhaps the vault hinted at by the astrological chart. Poirot resolved to investigate the vault next, but for now he had a prisoner to interrogate and a trap that had snared at least one player in this intricate game. The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone in the ballroom, the chandeliers dimming, his mind alight with possibilities. The sapphire's theft was no mere crime. It was a move in a chess match, and Poirot was determined to checkmate his opponent. The fingerprint, the key, the limping man, all were pieces of a puzzle he would solve, step by meticulous step, before the dawn broke over Ravenwood Manor. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Ally, the Heir in Ravenwood. Manor was thick with the scent of beeswax and intrigue as Hercule Poirot navigated the labyrinthine corridors, his polished shoes clicking softly against the oak floors. The third masked ball had ended hours ago, the sapphire's theft still a fresh wound in the manor's pride. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the puzzle, the unconscious guest, the poisoned velvet, Victor's heated whispers, and now the vanished jewel. Each clue was a thread, but the tapestry remained incomplete. He needed an ally, someone sharp, unnoticed, and untainted by the manor's web of deceit. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the east wing, casting golden streaks across the portraits of stern-faced hawthorns. Poirot paused before a painting of Lady Eleanor's great-aunt, her eyes seeming to follow him with silent judgment. He adjusted his mustache, a habit when his thoughts raced. The fingerprints on the sapphire's case, too precise, too foreign-nagged. At him, they didn't belong to any guest, suggesting an outsider. Victor's involvement was clear, but he couldn't have acted alone. Who was his shadow, the figure lurking beyond the ballroom's glow? Poirot's musings were interrupted by a soft clatter from the nearby nursery. Curious, he approached the half-open door and peered inside. Miss Clara Henshaw, the governess to Lord Reginald's young niece, knelt beside a wooden table, gathering scattered crayons. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly, but a stray lock betrayed her haste. She glanced up, her green eyes sharp with surprise, then softened into a polite smile. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, rising, "I didn't expect you here. The children are at their lessons in the garden." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle Clara, it is not the children I seek, but perhaps a moment of your time. The nursery, it is a place of innocence, non? Yet even here, secrets may linger." Clara's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around a red crayon. "Secrets? I'm just a governess, sir. I keep to my duties." "Precisement," Poirot said, stepping into the room. "And it is. Those who keep to the shadows who often see the most. Tell me, mademoiselle, what have you seen at Ravenwood?" Her gaze darted to the window, where the garden bloomed in vibrant chaos. She hesitated, then sighed. "I don't gossip, Monsieur Poirot. It's not my place. But I've heard things. Things I wasn't meant to." Poirot's eyes gleamed. And what, pray, were you not meant to hear? Clara set the crayon down, her voice low. 2 nights ago, before the first ball, I was in the rose garden, fetching little Beatrice's kite. It was late, and I heard voices near the apothecary shed. One was Victor Hawthorne, his voice is sharp, like a blade. He was arguing with someone, a man I didn't recognize. They spoke of the plan and the stone. I thought it was just family squabbles until the sapphire went missing. Poirot leaned closer, his voice a velvet murmur. This man, mademoiselle, describe him. Clara frowned, her brow creasing as she recalled. Tall, thin, with a limp. His voice was rough, like he'd smoked too many cigars. He wore a dark coat, and his hat was pulled low. I couldn't see his face, but he seemed dangerous. Victor called him Graves. Graves, Poirot repeated, committing the name to memory. And what else did this Graves say? They mentioned a vault, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something about the stars. Aligning and Reginald's ruin. I didn't understand it, but Victor sounded desperate. I hid behind the roses until they left. I didn't tell anyone I was afraid. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The astrological chart from the yacht. Library, the cryptic note in the ransacked room. The truth lies in the stars. This Graves was the key, the outsider whose fingerprints marred the sapphire's case. But Clara's testimony was a fragile thread. He needed more. Mademoiselle Clara, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, you have done well to share this, but I must ask, can you draw this man, this Graves? A sketch, however simple, may unmask him. Clara's eyes widened. Draw him? I'm no artist, monsieur, but I can try. I've a good memory for faces, even ones half seen. She fetched a sketchbook from the nursery shelf, its pages filled with childish doodles of flowers and ponies. Flipping to a blank page, she took a pencil and began to sketch. Poirot watched, noting the precision in her strokes despite her claim of inexperience. The figure took shape. A gaunt man with sharp cheekbones, a crooked nose, and a hat tilted to shadow his eyes. The limp was suggested by an uneven stance, one leg slightly bent. It's not perfect, Clara said, handing him the sketch. But it's what I saw. Poirot studied the drawing, his lips curving into a faint smile. Mademoiselle, this is magnifique. You have the eye of an observer, a rare gift. Tell me, have you seen this Graves since? No, Clara said, shaking her head, but I've been watching. I don't trust Victor, not after what I heard. He's always skulking about, whispering with Lady Eleanor, or glaring at Lord Reginald. I think he's planning something worse than theft. Poirot tucked the sketch into his pocket. You are wise to be cautious. But fear not Hercule Poirot does not allow the wicked to triumph. I may call upon you again, mademoiselle. Will you assist me should the need arise? Clara met his gaze, her jaw set. If it means protecting this house and the children, yes, I'll help. Bon, Poirot said, bowing slightly. You are an unexpected ally, Mademoiselle Clara, and perhaps the key to unraveling this tangle. Keep your eyes open and your courage close. He left the nursery, the sketch burning a hole in his pocket. The manor's secrets were beginning to surface, and Clara's testimony had given him a face to pursue. His next stop was the groundskeeper, whose nervous demeanor and access to the apothecary made him a potential witness or accomplice. Poirot's steps quickened as he descended the grand staircase, the morning light now harsh against the manor's opulent decay. The groundskeeper, Thomas Wren, was in the herb garden, pruning rosemary with unsteady hands. His weathered face, lined with years of toil, paled as Poirot approached. Monsieur Wren, Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing. You are a man who sees much and says little. But silence It can be a heavy burden, non? Wrens. Shears paused mid-snip. I don't know what you mean, sir. I just tend the gardens. Bean, sir, Poirot said, circling him like a cat. But the apothecary shed, it is part of your domain, is it not? And the night of the first ball, you are seen near it. By whom, you ask? By eyes that do not miss much. Tell me, Monsieur Wren, did you see a man with a limp? A man called Graves? Wren's hands trembled, and the shears clattered to the ground. I didn't want trouble, sir. I saw him, yes. Tall, thin, with a bad leg. He was with Master Victor, poking around the shed. I thought they were just talking, but Victor gave me a sovereign to keep quiet. Said it was family business. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this Graves, what did he do? He was carrying a small case, Wren said, his voice cracking. Leather, with a lock. I didn't see what was inside, but he handled it like. It was precious. They went toward the old stables after. I didn't follow, I swear it. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the details. A locked case, the old stables, a vault mentioned in whispers. The pieces were aligning, but the picture was still blurred. You have done well, Monsieur Wren, he said. But if you see this Graves again, you will tell me at once. We? Wren nodded, his relief palpable. Yes, sir. I don't want no part of this. Poirot left the garden, his thoughts turning to the old stables. They were a crumbling relic on the manor's edge, rarely visited, but perfect for clandestine meetings. He made his way across the grounds, the air growing cooler as he approached the weathered structure. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the doors creaked on rusted hinges. Inside, the air was musty, thick with the scent of old hay and forgotten summers. He moved carefully, his eyes scanning for signs of disturbance. In the far corner, beneath a pile of moldering sacks, he found it. A footprint, too large for Victor's polished boots, with an uneven tread suggesting a limp. Nearby, a scrap of paper caught his eye, half buried in the dirt. He knelt, brushing it clean. It was a torn receipt, dated 3 weeks prior, for a chemist's shop in London. The item listed was obscure aconite, a deadly poison. Poirot's pulse quickened. The poison on the velvet, the unconscious guest, the apothecary's stores, it all pointed to Graves. But why the sapphire? Was it a mere distraction, or part of a larger scheme? He pocketed the receipt, his resolve hardening. Graves was no phantom. He was a man with a plan, and Victor was his puppet or his master. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought Clara again. He found her in the library, reading to Beatrice, the child's laughter a stark contrast to the manor's tension. Mademoiselle Clara, he said softly, drawing her aside, your sketch has borne fruit. The groundskeeper confirms your Graves, seen with a locked case near the stables. I need your help once more. Have you access to the manor's guest records? Clara nodded. I manage the children's correspondence lessons, so I've seen. The guest lists, they're kept in Lord Reginald's study. Excellent, Poirot said. Tonight, when the house sleeps, meet me there. We must find any trace of this Graves, his name, his purpose. Will you do this? Clara's eyes flickered with determination. I will. For Beatrice, for the manor, I'll be there. That night, under the cover of darkness, Poirot and Clara crept into the study. The room was a fortress of mahogany and leather, its walls lined with ledgers and portraits. Clara lit a single candle, its flame casting shadows that danced like specters. She pulled a guest register from the desk, flipping through its pages with practiced ease. Here, she whispered, pointing to a name. Graves Edmund, listed as a consultant for Victor. No address, but he arrived 2 days before the first ball. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. Edmund Graves. A consultant, you say? A euphemism for a rogue, perhaps. Mademoiselle, you have given me the thread I needed. This Graves, he is no stranger to Ravenwood. He is a disgraced servant, perhaps, or a hired hand with a grudge. Clara's breath caught. Disgraced servant? There was a butler, years ago, dismissed for theft. Could it be him? Perhaps, Poirot said, his mind racing. We must find his trail where he stays, what he seeks. The sapphire, the poison, the vault all are linked. And you, Mademoiselle Clara, are my eyes in this house. Watch for Victor, for Graves, for any sign of their next move. Clara nodded, her face set with resolve. I'll watch, Monsieur Poirot. I won't let them hurt anyone else. As they parted, Poirot felt a surge of confidence. Clara was no mere governess. She was a spark in the dark, a mind as sharp as his own. With her help, he would unmask Graves and expose Victor's scheme. The net was tightening, and the stars, those cryptic guides, were beginning to align. The chapter closed with Poirot alone in his room, studying Clara's sketch by lamplight. The face of Edmund Graves stared back, a shadow given form. Tomorrow, he would hunt this ghost, and Ravenwood's secrets would hide no longer. Chapter 10. The Starlit Revelation. The air in Ravenwood Manor hung heavy with secrets, as though the very walls whispered conspiracies to those who dared listen. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed and his eyes sharp as a hawk's, stood in the grand library, the faint scent of aged leather and dust tickling his senses. Moonlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, casting silvery patterns across the oak-paneled floor. In his hands, he held the astrological chart he had discovered in Chapter 6, its cryptic symbols now partially deciphered, teasing him with the promise of answers. The chart, with its intricate web of constellations and cryptic annotations, was no mere decoration. It was a map, a puzzle, a key to the heart of the mystery that had ensnared the manor's inhabitants. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the threads of the case. The unconscious guest, the poisoned velvet, the stolen sapphire, Victor's blackmail, and now this chart, all pointing to a deeper truth buried within the Hawthorne family's history. The note found in the ransacked room, the truth lies. In the stars, had haunted him, its meaning elusive until now. The chart's decoded date, 1873, tied to a tragedy in the Hawthorne lineage, had sparked a revelation. There was more at stake than petty revenge or a stolen jewel. Victor Hawthorne, the estranged cousin, was not merely scheming for power, he was chasing a legacy, a claim to the estate itself. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, his movements precise, and murmured to himself, Mon Dieu, the stars do not lie. But men do, and Victor, he is a man most adept at deception. He traced a finger along the chart's edge, where a faint sketch of a crescent moon intersected with a line marked vault. The word sent a shiver of anticipation through him. A vault meant secrets, and secrets meant answers. But where was this vault, and what did it conceal? The library was silent save for the distant hum of the third masked ball, its music drifting faintly through the manor's corridors. Poirot had chosen to skip the festivities, leaving the swirling dancers and clinking champagne glasses to their revelry. His absence would go unnoticed. His reputation as an eccentric allowed him such liberties. Instead, he had enlisted Miss Clara, the sharp-witted governess from Chapter 9, to keep watch over the guests. Her sketch of the shadowy accomplice had been invaluable, but now Poirot needed her eyes elsewhere while he pursued this new lead. He paced the library, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. The chart's annotations were maddeningly vague, yet one phrase stood out. Beneath the watcher's gaze, the crescent guards the way. The watcher, he reasoned, must refer to a statue or portrait, a common feature in such grand estates. The crescent, however, was less clear. A window? A carving? A literal moon? Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. The little gray cells, they must work harder tonight. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak from the far end of the library. He froze, his hand instinctively slipping to the pocket of his tailored coat, where he kept a small notebook and pencil, his only weapons, but ones he wielded with deadly precision. The creak came again, deliberate, not the settling of an old house, but the cautious tread of someone who did not wish to be heard. Poirot's eyes darted to the shadows, where the moonlight failed to reach. "Qui est là?" he called softly, his voice calm but commanding. No answer came, but a faint rustle betrayed movement behind a towering bookshelf. Poirot moved swiftly, his steps silent as he approached. The bookshelf, carved with ivy motifs, stretched to the ceiling, its shelves laden with dusty tomes. He recalled the hidden compartment he'd found in Chapter 3, concealed within a similar shelf. Could this be another? His fingers brushed the wood, searching for a latch or seam. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a narrow panel swung inward, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Poirot's heart quickened, but his expression remained composed. "Alors, the stars lead us downward," he murmured. He retrieved a small silver flashlight from his pocket, practical tool for a man who often found himself in shadowy places, and began his descent. The air grew cooler, damp with the scent of stone and earth. The staircase was narrow, its steps worn smooth by time, suggesting it had been used long before Victor's schemes took root. At the bottom, Poirot found himself in a low-ceilinged chamber, its walls lined with rough-hewn stone. A single iron door stood before him, its surface etched with a crescent moon. The watcher's gaze, he realized, must refer to the statue of an owl he'd noticed in the library above, its eyes positioned to stare directly at the hidden panel. The crescent was here, guarding the way. Poirot examined the door, noting a keyhole too large for any ordinary key. He frowned, his mind racing. The chart had mentioned a key of the heavens, but no such object had surfaced in his investigation. He returned to the library, his flashlight sweeping the shelves for anything he might have missed. His eyes fell on a brass telescope, half hidden among the books, its base engraved with the same crescent moon. "C'est quoi?" he exclaimed softly. The telescope was heavy, but its base detached with a twist, revealing a hollow compartment containing a curiously shaped key, its head shaped like a starburst. Poirot's smile widened. The heavens indeed. Back in the chamber, he inserted the key into the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a vault no larger than a closet. Inside, a wooden chest sat on a stone pedestal, its lid carved with the hawthorn crest. Poirot's fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the lid, revealing a stack of yellowed documents tied with a faded ribbon. He untied it carefully, his eyes scanning the first page. It was a will, dated 1873, naming Victor's great-grandfather as the rightful heir to Ravenwood Manor, a will that had been suppressed, replaced by one favoring Reginald's lineage. Poirot's mind raced. This was Victor's motive, the fuel for his vendetta. He wasn't merely seeking to ruin Reginald. He believed the estate was rightfully his. The documents detailed a scandalous cover-up. Reginald's ancestor had bribed officials to bury the true will, ensuring his own claim. Victor, it seemed, had uncovered this truth and sought to reclaim his birthright, using blackmail, theft, and poison to destabilize Reginald's hold. But something nagged at Poirot. The will was too conveniently placed, too easily found. Why hide it in a vault only to leave clues in a chart? He examined the chest's interior, his fingers probing for false panels. A soft click revealed a second compartment, this one containing a small leather journal. Its pages were filled with Victor's handwriting, detailing his plans: the poisoning of the guest to create chaos, the theft of the sapphire to fund his legal battle, and the recruitment of the disgraced servant as his accomplice. But one entry stood out, dated only days ago. The butler suspects. He must be silenced. Poirot's blood ran cold. The butler, a quiet, unassuming man who had served the Hawthorns for decades, had been present at every key moment. His access to the apothecary, his knowledge of the manor's secrets. Could he be the true poisoner, acting independently of Victor's schemes? Poirot tucked the journal into his coat, his mind already racing toward the next step. He needed to confront the butler, but not yet. First, he had to ensure Victor's accomplice was caught. As planned in Chapter 11's auction trap dot, as he ascended the staircase, the library's silence was shattered by a distant crash. Poirot hurried toward the sound, emerging into the ballroom, where the masked ball was in full swing. A chandelier lay shattered on the floor, its crystals glinting like stars. Guests screamed, their masks askew, as Clara rushed to his side. "Monsieur Poirot," she gasped. It was him, the shadowy figure. He tried to flee through the terrace. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The accomplice, perhaps sensing the noose tightening, had made a reckless move. He followed Clara to the terrace, where the night air was crisp and the stars blazed overhead. A figure darted across the lawn, his silhouette unmistakable from Clara's sketch. Poirot gave chase, his short legs surprisingly swift, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The man stumbled, caught in the roots of an ancient oak, and Poirot was upon him. "Assez!" Poirot commanded, his voice like steel. The man froze, his face revealed as the disgraced servant Thomas from Chapter 9. "You will tell me everything," Poirot said, his tone leaving no room for defiance. Thomas, panting, nodded, his eyes darting nervously toward the manor. Over the next hour, Thomas confessed to his role in Victor's schemes, planting the poison, stealing the sapphire, and ransacking the locked room to retrieve the chart. But he swore he knew nothing of the vault or the will. "Victor said it was about revenge," he stammered. "I didn't know he was after the estate." Poirot listened, his expression unreadable. Thomas's confession confirmed much, but the butler's role remained unclear. As he handed Thomas to the local constable, who had been summoned by Clara, Poirot's mind turned to the journal's warning. The butler was the final piece, the shadow behind the shadow. He returned to the manor, the documents and journals safely tucked away, his resolve hardened. The night was far from over. The stars had revealed their truth, but one final unmasking awaited. Poirot glanced at the sky, the crescent moon hanging low, and murmured, "The game is nearly won, but the last move is the most dangerous." Chapter 11. The trap is sprung. The air in Ravenwood Manor's great hall hung heavy with the scent of roses and candle wax. A deceptive calm, masking the storm Hercule Poirot was about to unleash. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow over the assembled guests, their masks glinting like the facets of a jewel, each face a potential cipher in the puzzle that had consumed Poirot since his arrival. 10 days had passed since the poisoned guest, Julian Marsh, had collapsed clutching a scrap of burgundy velvet and the threads of the mystery Victor Hawthorne's blackmail, the stolen sapphire. The cryptic astrological chart had woven a tapestry of deceit that Poirot was determined to unravel tonight. A masked ball, the third since Poirot's arrival, was a grander affair than the previous two, as if Lord Reginald Hawthorne sought to drown suspicion in opulence. Crimson drapes framed the tall windows, and a quartet played a lively gavotte, urging guests to dance. Yet Poirot, his black domino mask accentuating the sharpness of his gray eyes, stood apart, his ebony cane, a silent sentinel by his side. His plan was in motion. A staged auction of the stolen sapphire, announced that morning to draw out Victor's accomplice and restore the gem to its rightful place. The bait was set, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with anticipation. He had spent the morning orchestrating the ruse with surgical precision. Lady Eleanor, now his reluctant ally after her confession of infidelity, had spread word of the auction, claiming the sapphire had been recovered and would be sold to fund a charity dear to her heart. Lord Reginald, unaware of the true purpose, had approved, his pride stung by the theft but mollified by the prospect of public acclaim. Clara Duval, the sharp-witted governess, had agreed to watch the crowd, her keen eyes trained on any who lingered too long near the display case, with the sapphire actually a clever glass. Replica now gleamed under a spotlight. Poirot's gaze swept the hall, noting the players in his carefully staged drama. Lord Reginald, in a lion mask, stood near the auction podium, his booming voice rallying guests to bid generously. Lady Eleanor, her peacock mask restored, moved among the crowd, her smile a fragile mask over her anxiety. Clara, in a swan mask, hovered near a marble pillar, her posture alert. And somewhere in the throng, Poirot knew, was the accomplice, a disgraced former servant named Silas Crowe, identified by Clara's sketch and the groundskeeper's testimony. Victor, the mastermind, remained elusive, but Poirot was certain. Silas would lead him to his quarry. The auction began with a flourish, the auctioneer a wiry man in a jester mask, extolling the sapphire's brilliance. "A gem of unparalleled beauty, ladies and gentlemen," he declared, his voice carrying over the music. "Bidding starts at £10,000. The crowd buzzed, hands rising with bids, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. He had positioned himself near a side door, where a concealed passage led to the display case's rear access. If Silas took the bait, he would attempt to steal the sapphire during the auction's chaos. Unaware that Poirot's trap awaited, a figure caught his eye, a man in a fox mask, his movements furtive as he edged toward the passage. Poirot's pulse quickened. The man's build matched Silas's description. Wiry, with a slight limp from an old injury. Poirot signaled to a footman, one of two he had enlisted to guard the passage, and slipped into the shadows, his cane silent on the polished floor. The passage was dim, lit only by flickering sconces. Poirot moved swiftly, his senses attuned to every sound. Ahead, the fox-masked man paused at a hidden panel behind the display case, his gloved hands fumbling with a lockpick. Poirot stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "Monsieur, I suggest you reconsider. The sapphire is not worth your freedom." The man froze, then spun, his mask glinting with menace. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, little man," he hissed, his voice rough with a Kentish accent. He lunged, a knife flashing in his hand, but Poirot was prepared. With a deft twist of his cane, he knocked the blade aside, and the footman surged forward, pinning Silas to the ground. "Mon Dieu, such impatience," Poirot said, adjusting his cuffs as Silas struggled. "You are Silas Crowe, n'est-ce pas? Accomplice to Victor Hawthorne. The game, as they say, is up." Silas spat, his mask askew. "You've got nothing on me. Victor's long gone, and you'll never prove a thing." Poirot's mustache twitched. With a smile, "We shall see, Monsieur Crowe. But first, let us discuss your role in the theft of the sapphire and the poisoning of Julian Marsh." The footman hauled Silas to a nearby study, where Poirot had arranged for a constable to wait, summoned discreetly that afternoon. As Silas was restrained, Poirot examined the knife, noting a faint residue on the blade, possibly the same poison used on Marsh. He pocketed it carefully, his mind already racing ahead to the interrogation. Back in the hall, the auction continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind the scenes. Poirot re-entered, signaling Clara to join him. "Mademoiselle, your vigilance has paid off," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Silas Crowe is in custody, and the sapphire well, the replica remains safe, but we must learn what he knows." Clara's swan mask tilted, her voice low. "Did he confess? About Victor?" "Not yet," Poirot admitted, "but he will. Men like Silas are bold until cornered. Come, let us observe the crowd. Victor may yet show himself, sensing his plan has gone awry." They moved to a balcony overlooking the hall, where the bidding had reached a fever pitch. The replica sapphire, its glass heart catching the light, drew gasps and exorbitant bids. Poirot's gaze darted between guests, seeking any sign of Victor's silver wolf mask. He noted Lady Eleanor's strained expression as she deflected questions about the sapphire's recovery, and Lord Reginald's oblivious pride as he toasted the crowd. A new figure caught Poirot's attention, a woman in a raven mask, her black gown shimmering with jet beads. She stood apart, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Something about her triggered a memory, the raven seal on the letter that had summoned him. Could she be the mysterious friend? Before he could approach, she vanished into the crowd, leaving only a faint scent of jasmine in her wake. The auction concluded with a winning bid of £20,000, the proceeds promised to Lady Eleanor's charity. The crowd cheered, but Poirot's focus was on Silas, now being questioned in the study. He and Clara descended, joining the constable, a stout man named Hargreaves, who was scribbling notes. "Silas is talking," Hargreaves said, his mustache bristling. "Says Victor paid him to steal the sapphire and plant evidence to frame Lord Reginald. Wanted to ruin his reputation, make him look like a fool who couldn't protect his own treasures." Poirot nodded, his mind fitting the pieces together. "And the poisoning? Did he confess to that?" "Not yet," Hargreaves replied. "Claims he only handled the theft. Says Victor had another man for the Messier work." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Another accomplice?" The puzzle was not yet complete. "Monsieur Crowe, let us be clear," he said, addressing Silas, whose fox mask now lay discarded, revealing a gaunt face and defiant eyes. "You will tell me where Victor is hiding, and who this other man is, or you will face the full weight of the law alone." Silas sneered, but faltered under Poirot's unyielding gaze. "Victor's in London," he muttered. "Some boarding house in Whitechapel. I don't know the other bloke Victor called him. The chemist, that's all. I got." As Silas was led away, Poirot returned to the hall, where the ball was winding down. Guests were departing, their masks slipping to reveal flushed, weary faces. Lady Eleanor approached, her peacock mask dangling from her hand. "Is it over, Monsieur Poirot? Have you caught the thief?" "The thief, oui," Poirot said, his tone measured. "But the mastermind remains at large. Tell me, madame, have you seen a woman in a raven mask tonight?" Eleanor frowned, her brow creasing. "A raven mask? No, I don't recall, but there were so many guests. Why do you ask?" "A hunch," Poirot replied, his smile enigmatic. "The night has given us much, but it keeps some secret still." He bid her good night and stepped onto the Manor's terrace, where the air was cool and the stars burned bright above the Kentish hills. The sapphire gloss, though it was had been preserved, Silas was in custody, and Victor's location was within reach. Yet the raven-masked woman and the mysterious chemist lingered in Poirot's mind, shadows yet to be dispelled. The chapter closed with Poirot lighting a cigarette, a rare indulgence, and exhaling a plume of smoke into the night. The trap had sprung, but the hunt was far from over. Victor Hawthorne would answer for his crimes, and the truth behind the raven's call would be revealed. For now, Poirot savored the small victory, his resolve as sharp as the stars above.